Members of the public may be recorded. Council requests that all members of the public are respectful and use the appropriate language.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Are there any apologies? No apologies? Okay, we'll take that on note. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. There are no mayoral minutes. Just before I go on, I'll just note in the chamber the first female mayor of the former Holroyd Council, Vet Whitfield. Nice to see you dropping in from the North Coast. Thank you. Public forums, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are one speaker on 4 items. It's items 175, 176, 177 and 179. Mr. Pegram.
Mr. Mark Pegram, are you in the gallery? I'll call again. Mr. Mark Pegram. Well, I'll move on, Mr. General Manager. Oh, certainly, Councillor Grove.
I'd like to move, and in establishing the urgency, I'd refer to the New South Wales government's announcement from earlier today that Council begin discussion with the City of Parramatta and Canterbury Bankstown Council regarding future light rail corridors as part of stage 3 of existing Parramatta light rail projects. And if you establish the urgency, Mr. Mayor, I'll speak to it.
I will. That's come into effect, the stage 2 today.
The Premier's made the announcement today. Yeah.
So we're hopeful that stage 3 will be the route that you're.
There are a number of Parramatta to Bankstown routes that have been discussed. One of which has been identified in the final 4 in a previous corridor study. But yes, I think we discuss all the potential Parramatta Bankstown routes just going forward. It's about putting ourselves on the agenda over the next couple of months.
I'll take that as a matter of urgency, but I will ask for a second. Second, Councillor Rami. Councillor Grove, you'll have 5 minutes to address the council.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just by way of putting the issue on the back of a postage stamp today, the New South Wales government announced a second route called Stage 2 of the Parramatta Light Rail. This route would follow the existing Parramatta Light Rail route, which has already been announced. It would take a right at across one of the, I'm just trying to remember the name of the streets at Rydalmere, and it would weave its way back over the river and across to Olympic Park. When Parramatta Council had funded a feasibility study of potential light rail routes in Parramatta some years ago, a number of those options included routes to Bankstown through the area which is now in Cumberland Council. One was a Clyde Street alignment. I don't think it was an explicit Clyde Street alignment, but it had regard to the Duck River, the Duck Creek corridor, would connect with Bankstown. Look, Bankstown is also a city which is on the move at this point in time. There are some 16,000 people who move from Bankstown to Parramatta every day, in addition to our own local residents who appreciate having better connectivity to the city of Parramatta. This motion seeks to make sure that Parramatta Light Rail extends beyond the existing City of Parramatta borders, that we start to put a southern focus back into Greater Parramatta, and that as we talk about development and as we talk about growth, we actually talk about a bit of infrastructure along the way. Too often we hear about one without the other. I think this is an opportunity for the newer organisation with the scale and capacity that was referred to by state government partners to actually come up and say, well, look, we're going to start delivering some of that scale and capacity and that credible partner to state government that you're looking for by talking to our colleagues either side of the fence, and putting together the case for a new light rail line.
Thank you, Councillor Grave. Further discussion? Councillor Garrard.
History tells us that Parramatta Council had to put up some $1 million about 8 years ago to begin a campaign which has resulted in, at this stage, 2 proposals being put forward by the government. But one thing is very clear when we look at the area that we represent and the area that we live in, is that while we have a fair bit of movement, opportunity for movement east-west, we have very, very poor movement capacity north-south. And when we're talking about light rail, certainly the opportunity to service the south end of the region, the central region of Sydney, is most important. You know, each day there's a goods train leaves Clyde and gets to Botany and travels on a route across the city. And it's a route that is not used by commuter travel. The corridors are there. They might edge to our city, but the point is this: the success of this resolution and the success of our endeavour into the future will be about how we communicate and how we work with other surrounding councils to achieve an outcome which delivers real transport options. What's been proposed in Parramatta at the moment, those two routes that have been identified, and I might add the funding differential between one and the other is massive. The amount of money for either hasn't been found yet. So, I mean, you can appreciate how much work is required in order to get a third route on the agenda. But it doesn't mean that we should not be trying through using our regional capacity to get the members of parliament and get the councils and get the communities on side so that we can get a route towards the south. It's most important that we do that, and I believe too that any transport option that's developed in our region should be at no cost to our ratepayers, and it should be on a level par with what's happening in the eastern suburbs. Down in the eastern suburbs, you don't see businesses being taxed. You don't see residents being taxed. And if there's going to be light rail alternatives and transport initiatives out here, well then our people shouldn't be taxed at all. So we have a lot of work to do to gather momentum around this motion, and I thoroughly support it and ask the chamber to endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Elmore.
I do support this matter of urgency, Mr. Mayor, but I almost said Lord Mayor then. But we did explore this when we were back on Parramatta Council, and Councillor Garrard was exactly right. We spent $1 million doing a feasibility. Well, we didn't get to the feasibility study, but we just got to planning some routes. But what's been overlooked, and I've put this forward a number of times, is there's already a direct rail link from Parramatta to Bankstown. There's a Y link. It's not electrified. It's used by the freight trains. So if you want to get a direct link from Parramatta to Bankstown, just get that Y link going at Lidcombe Station, and it'll all be resolved.
We'll do it tomorrow.
Parramatta Bankstown, yeah. Sorry?
Councillor Addy.
Also a Y link just past. You're referring to the Y link at Regent's Park Station.
There's 3 bridges. Oh, there's 2 bridges.
Yes, yes.
So the rail link from the Y link from, if you're travelling from Granville, Clyde, the Y link goes top to the right, goes across where the old ice works used to be, and off to Bankstown.
So you're referring from this end. But Mr. Mayor, through you to whoever can answer the question, there is no direct link from Parramatta to Bankstown via Marylands, is there?
Mr. McNulty or? No. Mr. Ryan?
Is there a physical line?
Mr Mayor, my understanding is no, there's no current service that's direct. The current service is on the Marylands line to Parramatta and then on to Riverston.
Riverston, okay. Thank you.
Take that as clarification.
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Addy. Any further discussion? No further discussion? Right of reply, Councillor Grove?
I'll
Waive that?
Yep.
Yes, before we vote,
What happened to Bankstown? Connecting Bankstown and
Councillor Elmore, I believe. Potential light rail, what are you suggesting, Count? Yep, fine. No further discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, I believe we have a resident who wishes to ask some public forum questions who wasn't here when I earlier called. So with your indulgence, I'll ask Mr. Mark Pigram to come to the table, please. Mr. Pigram, I believe you have well, you've listed 4 items to speak. So under the Code of Meeting Practice, you're entitled to 3 minutes for each item. So I'll pass you over to item 175/17, the draft council expenses facilities.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'd say what an honour. Never anticipated this at all. I saw the live stream on Merrill election night and sat there and went, wow, what's happened here? But never for the life of me did I think this was one of the outcomes. Mr. Mayor, I come down here to speak on this matter very much in defence of council's elected representatives. I find, and I can say this because I'm not a councillor, so, and I know a lot of councillors would be troubled by having to stand up and make comment that I'm about to make. But I find this expense and facilities policy really mean-spirited. And I think it comes out of a mean-spirited administrator who, while he upset the community, very much united the community because the community wanted him gone. And but it's left a few issues there for the council to progress with, and I very much am still watching and reading the business papers, and I very much appreciate the notice of motions that were put forward at the last meeting carried to bring community back to council rather than administration. But for this, I think it's so unfair. I think it's so unfair, the mean-fisted position that's been taken in relation to councillors. And certainly I'm not one who wants to sit back and say, well, you know, give councillors anything they want. Certainly not. But there has to be a reasonable expectation and acceptance as to what councillors have to go through. I can look on the web page today and see every councillor's mobile phone. I can see every councillor's email address. Every councillor in this chamber is subject to the service requirements of the community. And that's what you're here for. You're here to serve. But then if I go on to the organisation chart part of the website, and I had response from the Assistant General Manager of Council today, which I just couldn't believe, where if you look at the organisation chart, I thought I'd print some out in black and white so councillors who aren't aware of it can actually have a look. If you look at it on the web page, you can't decipher it. If you look at it on printed out in colour, you can't decipher it. So I printed it out in black and white, and you still can't decipher it. So what we've got is we've got a really mean-fisted council expenses and facility policy, putting the councillors at the very front page of service to the community. And with respect to the officers are hiding themselves, getting paid a lot more money, getting their cars renewed every 2 years, getting their income, getting their salary. If I can just be allowed to...
If the council would like to grant a 1 minute extension. Thank you.
Getting their phones, getting their laptops, getting whatever. But the councillors, the ones who are really out there doing the heavy yards, and their families, very importantly, it's a really mean-fisted approach. Now, I haven't seen the arrangements, but I've heard about the renewed facilities for the mayor. From what I've heard, it's an absolute disgrace. I couldn't believe when I heard what I was told. I couldn't believe when I saw this, knowing that Mr. Mave thought the old arrangement was so good while he was mayor, and while he thought he was mayor, I know he said it once or twice, while he was administrator, but then the moment an elected council came to play, there had to be a level playing field. Now, Mr. Mayor, you don't get paid $300,000 a year, but you're being told to sit on the level playing field with the general manager. I find that totally unfair. I think the structure of the chamber is all wrong. But to think that a visiting member of another country could come to this chamber, and if they want to use the conveniences, they have to be told, well, there's a public toilet out there in the foyer. I think, who made such ludicrous decisions? What I'm getting to, and I'll finish it on this, I really do think that council shouldn't adopt this policy, that you should actually look for parity, look at Penrith, look at Blacktown Council, and look at Sutherland. Get the officers that come back with a report to the expenses and facilities that are provided to those councils, which are the same size, same status and structure as this one, and then make your decision. I wouldn't let a mean-spirited administrator make it tough for you.
Thank you, Mr. Pigram. Would you like to continue with the next item, 176, the council committee overview?
With that one, Mr. Mayor, I'd say that I think that there's a real need for the traffic committee to be brought back to be a monthly committee, and I really do think you should have community involvement. At the moment, it's this 3 monthly thing, and they can do it over the phone or whatever. There's a real loss of community input as to what are the real issues. The community concerns about these matters. It's just an officer, the RTA, and whoever, and a member of Parliament's representative. There's a loss of the community involvement, and it should be a monthly meeting because people have to wait too long for a decision out of that committee. The audit committee, I very much appreciate that. It's very much modelled on the old Holroyd Council audit committee structure, which I would take credit for from many years ago when a motion was put before council to establish one. Same thing though, should be a member of the community at least, or at least 2, to be part of it, to give transparency and openness to the process. Just not block it up with council officers and 1 or 2 representatives who know council officers. I think it loses its transparency and openness by having all these professionals involved.
Move on to the next item. Councillor Grove, on that item.
You were getting to the time limit?
No, we've still got plenty of time.
I'll ask a question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pigram. Item 177, the draft code of meeting practice.
And I've locked that in my request to speak on the basis of there's a notice of motion there as well to update the code, and I really appreciate what that motion is saying. It's bringing community back to council operations, which the administrator threw away. But Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to raise with council is there was a day when you could get onto council's website and look at a business paper and key in a name, key in an address, key in a suburb, and you'd get everything that was listed in relation to that particular address, street or suburb going back as many years as you want. Now, I understand council's going through a very expensive IT upgrade. If you look at what people have to go through when you get on the website today to read the business paper for this, you have to trawl all the way down through all these pages of stuff, which you can't, there's no short link to it. You literally have to go page by page by page by page. Now, if that's an advancement in the community of an administration of our local government, well, knock me on the head. Yeah, I think it's terrible. I couldn't even be bothered going to the specific items to review them because it just would have taken me hours. And that's why I really appreciate where Councillor Lake's coming from. Allow communities to come along, people to come along, raise a question, not related to a business item that's on the agenda, but still be able to speak to a business item as well. But this business paper, that's a disgrace. Even Parramatta's doing better than you, and Parramatta's a joke in its own right. Lotus Notes, and I'll use that term, Lotus Notes used to be able to give us a facility, you could key in a name and address, and you'd go back, 5 years and find out anything. This, you can only go by one page at a time, and if you're lucky enough, you might find what you're looking for. That's not transparency, that's not openness, that's not what Cumberland Council purports itself to be putting forward. And I'm not saying elected representatives, the councillors are only new. And with that, Mr Mayor, I will say congratulations, one and all, for being elected. I would have liked to have been there, but I couldn't have said what I've now just said. And I'd like to congratulate my fellow community colleagues, Councillor Garrard and Councillor Sarkis, and say 32 votes, Eddie. 32 votes is the difference, 15 short, 17 in front. And I hope you gave your daughter and her cousin a really big hug because they would have got those 32 votes for you.
I think we all know the numbers now.
Thank you, Mr Pigram. Are there any questions of Mr Pigram? None? Thank you.
You indicated that Mr Pigram might have been running a bit short for time on his first issue. I just wanted to check if Mr Pigram had anything else he wanted to add with respect to the first one.
All I would say is that I was derailed by the fact that you were so prompt. I thought it was actually going back to a little bit of where the meeting is now heading towards, public forum and then speaking on agenda items later on. I thought that had already happened. So that's why I got caught out. But other than that, no, the only additional thing is I think there should be a community committee set up for just general things instead of these nonsense bringing in a $100,000 consultant to let you know what the community thinks. Have a 6-monthly community group. And then secondly, now that there's a formation of a Cumberland police service, get in the formative stages to make sure that there's community representation on that as well.
Thank you, Mr Pigram. Council, we'll move on to the first item.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, should we do minutes?
Oh,
Yep.
my apologies. Exactly correct, Councillor Lake. Wasn't on my first slip of paper, but
Of course, it's an extraordinary meeting.
we don't. No, thank you. Council, item 174/17, the Local Government New South Wales Annual Conference. Councillor Lake.
I've just got a couple of questions, actually, Mr Mayor, if I might. Looking at the cost of this conference, which is in Sydney, I think, did I read $900 for early bird registration? Is that cost inclusive of accommodation? It's not. Okay.
No.
So there's nothing cheaper if you decide to go home for the evening. Okay, I see. I'll move the recommendations and I can nominate 5 councillors who are interested in attending the conference. If you would like their names.
Councillor Lake. Is there a second for that? Second, and Councillor Elmore. Councillor Lake.
So the 5 nominees are George Campbell, Kun Huang, Lisa Lake, Steve Christo and Ola Hamid. There's 5.
Do have an item I have also been indicated by Councillor Garrard that he wishes to attend. Any others? Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Zada.
Two more.
Councillor Zareka. Any other?
Did you take the names down already? Close the meeting?
Oh, just what I was given, yeah. Are you? Wait a minute, well, we've got some, and we've got an indication of Councillor Rami.
11 is irrelevant, Mr. Mayor, because 11 is the voting delegates. Doesn't mean we all can't go.
No, that's correct. That's correct. So in actual fact, the full 15 can attend, but it is the actual. So let's be precise. Who was actually going to attend?
The assumption is if we attend, we'd like to be able to vote. So
I understand
there
that,
might have to be.
But if someone isn't attending, we're automatically knocking them out as a voting delegate. That's what I'm saying. Who's not is probably the easier question. Who isn't attending? Councillor Elmore and Councillor Saha. But we've got to get the delegates.
Only the delegates, we can, attendance is just another frustrating.
No, that's fine, but at least we know that 2 are out of the equation, Mr. Ryan. Okay, so there are, I believe, 11 voting delegates positions for the election and 10 for the motion. Have I got that? The round. Okay. So obviously, I take it who's interested in the voting positions. Well, we're going to have to vote. Now.
Put the motion into 2.
Yes.
Put the motion.
If we stand this down for a little while, people might be able to sort it out, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll take that advice and we'll park it.
Mr. Wright, do you want to say something? Or not?
Well, I'm more than happy to go on the one that's light, number 1, and I'm not fussed about number 2. Council, the next item is 175/17, the draft councillor expenses and facilities policy. To the actual item as the draft document. Yes. Councillor Army.
I'd like to reduce the carer's expense of $5,000 to $1,000, and also reduce the councillor remuneration, or for lack of a better word, to $1,000 a year. Do I have a seconder?
I'll ask for a second to Councillor Army.
Can we get a clarification as to what he's referring to first, please?
Clarify, Mr. Mayor, is that $1,000 for the carers and $1,000 in lieu of $24,000?
Yes. Yes.
Point of order. There are two issues. The first is that the remuneration policy is no longer included.
Separate, correct.
And the second is that there is a pay band which council is required to stay in. So we can't reduce to the minimum of 1,000 per year, even if it was on the agenda.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, would you like to reconsider your motion?
Just about the carer's expense in that case.
So you'd like it reduced to 1,000?
Yes.
Okay. But you're fine with everything else. Councillor Sarkis, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Rami, do you wish to speak to that?
I won't.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I won't dwell on it too much. I think we discussed it last week in a fair amount of detail. I believe councillors on council are here to provide a service in line with what Mr. Pigram touched on a bit earlier. And in doing so, and in putting your hand up to run on council, one should be aware of circumstances in their life and things that may inhibit or impinge them from being able to run that and or being able to carry that out effectively. If that's kids, well, a lot of councillors here in this room have made alternate arrangements for kids to be looked after and for carers to be available. If we look at $5,000 a year over a 3-year term across 15 councillors, it's approximately $240,000 that if this motion or amendment was to get up, we can predominantly save that 200-odd thousand. It's 2 roundabouts that can go back into the community. It's rubbish cleaning, it's cleaning around our streets, it's money that can go back into the community and spent on the community rather than, dealing with something that we should deal with as councillors and something that we should have accounted for before we put our hand up to run as councillors. I won't say much more on that, but it's all in the name of an efficient spend of taxpayer money or ratepayer money.
Thank you, Councillor Rami. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rami, I vividly remember you telling me in that corridor over there that you thought $24,000 was too little. And quite frankly, I don't appreciate your cheap political point scoring.
Yeah,
I do want to reference to the DLG. The General Manager read it to us yesterday and hopefully...
One moment, Councillor Ahmed. I believe you. I agree. I believe you were using a figure from another item or another not involved in this item. So I'm confused. If you can either clarify or withdraw.
I thought the motion was that we reduce the allowance to $1,000.
No, that's been withdrawn. That's been withdrawn. It's
that's
purely,
been withdrawn.
Purely,
well, sure.
So if you could.
I withdraw.
Thank you.
So back onto the DLG. Thank you, General Manager, for reminding us of this the other week. Now, I'm sick of the misogyny. You stood there last week and you yelled out that we were not to do this, that we were not to ask for carers leave. Now, do I need to read this to you again? Because I'm happy to. Sorry, carers allowance, I beg your pardon. Underrepresented groups such as those in primary caregiver roles to seek election to council by using that they would be financially or otherwise disadvantaged in undertaking the civic duties of a councillor. Now, I'll leave it there. I just think that this is cheap political scoring, Joe.
I've got Councillor Elmore, and then I think Councillor Christo, and then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Elmore.
I have a question, Lord Mayor. Sorry, Mayor. I've been doing it for 8 years, so it's hard to get. It's hard to it's hard to adjust. But Councillor Rummy was talking about childcare. I was understanding that carers leave is not just childcare; it's for elderly parents, it's for people with disabilities, it's people under your care. So I just want to clarify. From what Councillor Rummy said, was it just about childcare expenses, or was it about carers allowance?
Well, I believe in the way that the document is drafted, that it is not only childcare, it's carers leave. But I'll ask for some clarification from Councillor Rummy. Councillor Rummy. Just to clarify whether you were talking about carers leave or in particular just
referring to the $5,000 carers allowance.
Carers allowance. Does that answer your question, Councillor? Thank you. Christo, then Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Christo.
I'm absolutely appalled at this proposed motion. I've got to say, as a father of 2 daughters myself, unfortunately, we're not encouraging primary caregivers or any single parents to be on council, and I can't believe that's even been proposed and seconded. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Christo. Councillor Campbell.
Mr Mayor, we heard Mr Pigram speak earlier about the expenses policies being mean-fisted was the word that he used. The most mean-fisted or mean-spirited comment that I can remember being said, I think, in any council is the one that we heard tonight from Councillor Rami. The article that Councillor Harmad referred to from the Office of Local Government made it very clear that Department of Local Government made it very clear that they believed that it was necessary to make it possible for a broad range of people to participate in local government. The carers allowance makes it possible for people with responsibilities to be here. And to say that it should be knocked down to $1,000 is a way of saying we don't want people with family responsibilities to participate in local government. That's what it amounts to. I think it is mean, it is nasty, and it's the sort of thing which should not be said. We know it's being directed at one person who has done nothing to provoke this. Of course it is. Those of us who were here, last week or whenever it was, we know what it was all about. It is mean and nasty, and it is unbecoming of any councillor to raise something like that.
Yeah.
The argument put forward, $5,000. Well, that is, it's not $5,000 cash. It's not a perk. It's money which is available if somebody needs it, and that person will have to produce receipts and demonstrate that they needed that assistance to allow them to undertake their responsibilities as a councillor. To talk about multiply that by 15 to come to $200,000, that is absurd. It is ridiculous to suggest that 15 people are going to claim $5,000 per year in carers allowance. We all know that that's not true. And I think it is dishonest to suggest that. If one person claims the full $5,000, if 2 people, if 3 people claim the full $5,000, what is that compared with the council's budget of $200 million a year? $200 million. And we're talking about a maximum of $5,000 to allow someone to participate fully in local government, to serve the people, not to go on a holiday. It's not a perk. That allows somebody to serve the community. And that's all it's about. And I think that Councillor Ramey should be thoroughly ashamed of himself.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Sarkis, then Councillor Garrard. Councillor Sarkis.
Mr Mayor, I seconded this motion. Last week, as it's been alluded to, Mr Mayor, without dropping names, this was discussed in a workshop when I said that I had to make certain arrangements in my personal life so I could be here on the third Wednesdays, because when we ran for council this time, it was only one Wednesday a month being the first Wednesday. Normally at this time, I would be overseas in China or in the Philippines or wherever I have to be doing my business. Now, I had to change that around, Mr Mayor. You talk about appalling. When I said, now I made those arrangements without crying on anybody's shoulder, without asking for any subsidies or anybody to chip in and say, hey, you know, you're having to send somebody else there to look after your business, which is your livelihood, which is what puts your food on the table, right? And a comment that was thrown from the other side of the table, Mr Mayor, was maybe you shouldn't have run for council. Oh, quick to throw that comment. Maybe I shouldn't have run for council. Yeah, Mr Mayor, I had made those arrangements and never brought it up. I only mentioned it last week when this matter came up. And that's the response that I got. Mr Mayor, I'd say I've been on council, I was on council for 12 and a bit years. I've never claimed carers' allowances, never. Yet, yeah, I have 3 kids. I had 3 kids when I was on council last. Never, every time we've had to bring somebody in to look after our kids, I would look after it. I'd made the choice to run for council, and I would represent the best I could, and whatever I had to do at home in my personal life, I would work around. I don't see what's changed. Whether we're a smaller council or a larger council, whether we have 15 councillors or 12 councillors, our duties and obligations are pretty much the same. I would ask, Mr Mayor, in the last 13 or 14 years on Cumberland Council, since 2004, I'd ask how many people on this council actually requested carers' allowances. I don't think anybody has. Nonetheless, Mr Mayor, I think 5,000 is a bit excessive. If you really need it, I think 1,000 is enough. Heck, I said 500, but Joe said no, 1,000 is okay. So I was willing to run with that.
Thank you, Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Garrard, then Councillor Rang.
Mr Mayor, look, I'd go down the same track. I mean, I've got 4 children and they're as old as long as I've been on this council. And at no stage have I needed to have a carer's allowance. The comment was made here at the workshop. In fact, the question was raised, if 5,000 wasn't enough, what happened if it was 6,000 or 7,000? And I think the answer that was given, that, well, you know, we can make arrangements to ensure that no one is disadvantaged. I think that was the answer that came across at the workshop. Is that through you, Mr Mayor? Was that comment made?
I think something to that effect, yes.
You see, I think that $1,000 is a good starting point. And let's just see how far that goes. If councillors find out that there's a problem at that point, well, I think I'd suggest they come back to the chamber and we'll readdress it as we should. On other matters, exempt conferences and professional development programs, I think we should extend it so that where the attendance of the Mayor and Deputy is required to represent the Council, then Council will cover the cost of accommodation, travel, meals as necessary. Mr Mayor, you would be aware, I suppose, there's circular going around now calling for a meeting of mayors and deputies, and I don't see why our facilities allowance doesn't cover that, and I think that would be most appropriate to have it included, because I know frequently there are meetings down in Canberra, and the same issue applies. The other matter I'd ask to have included in the motion is under the additional facilities for the mayor. I've gone through this through item 10, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. I can't see where the mayor is able to entertain any guests to the city. And I know I came across here and got entertained by a mayor of Holroyd when I was Lord Mayor of Parramatta. And I know I got offered a Sayo biscuit and something equivalent to that and a glass of water when I was in the mayor's office in this building, Mr. Mayor. And I thought that was a little unusual. I certainly didn't expect lobster or anything like that. But I thought it was rather strange how the mayor of Holroyd entertained their guests to their city. Now, not that I was important, but undoubtedly there would be any number of people that you would try and impress in this new council of Cumberland as we go forward. And I would suggest that perhaps a clause that reads something like that appropriate arrangements be left.
Slowly, please, Councillor Garrow. They're trying to take it down, sir.
Okay, I'll eat slowly. That appropriate arrangements be left in the hands of the mayoral office when catering facilities are required, and that such necessity is at the discretion of the mayor.
Just a question to the mover. That change, if adopted, would obviously still be subject, of course, to the provisions around reporting that are elsewhere in the document.
In accordance with the rest of the document's reporting mechanisms.
Thank you.
Just is that permissible from you, Councillor Rami? Councillor Sarkis? And just for clarification, Councillor Garrard, I do believe it was a tea-bun with the expense of butter, but that's as I can recollect.
Well, local mayors became very thin, I can tell you.
Councillor Huang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to share my view. I'm actually quite disgusted at the way this debate is going, directing. Majority of people in our council wouldn't have the privilege to run for public office if they don't if they don't have financial support to basically look after their family, to have the carers payment. And basically where this debate is heading is saying, people, Councillor Rami and Councillor Sarkis are basically saying that if you aren't wealthy enough, don't run for public office. That's basically where this debate is heading towards. So I just want to put my view. I'm actually quite disgusted that we have to debate on this item.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sarkis?
I think he's putting words in our mouth and derogatory to our well-being and our nature, Mr. Mayor. I don't think we're saying that at all. We're not saying that if you're not wealthy, you shouldn't run for council.
Well, I'll take that, Councillor Sarkis, as a clarification. Do you accept that, Councillor Huang?
Well, what Councillor Sarkis and what Councillor Rami are saying is that unless you can make an alternative arrangement to look after your family, don't run for public office.
We did not say that at all.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm just trying to get my handle around one point of order at a time. Well, I can understand the confusion from the councillor about what the intent was. Would you like to, either yourself or Councillor Rami, clarify?
I'm happy to clarify, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Sarkis.
Mr. Mayor, when we ran for council, we needed the support of our family and friends to actually get on council. So when you decide to run for council, you've obviously considered that family support throughout the next 3 years if you're successful. Now, if you haven't been able to sit down and consider that, then by golly, how are you going to consider council business moving forward? If you can't consider your own position, how are you going to consider the position of the city? Yeah, you're probably right. If you can't consider your own position, maybe you shouldn't run for council. But it's got nothing to do with being wealthy or not wealthy. It's about actually giving consideration to what you're going to do.
One moment, Councillor.
I think Mr. Sarkis just said that I was right, wasn't it? If you can't consider your family, then you shouldn't run.
Look, I believe it's interpretation. I can't see an affront in it, but I'll pass unless you're finished, Councillor.
Yes.
Councillor Saha, and then Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it was never about money. So it was about the care or expenses for Councillor Ola Hamad's children and my children for some time when we need to attend council meetings and we couldn't find any family members or the primary carer to look after our children. And we actually requested, and I did personally, I didn't want to claim anything. I requested the general manager if any in-house facility can be given or provided to me so I can bring my children or my daughter who is just 2 years old and leave her in the council facility with someone so that I can attend the council meeting between 6 and 7 o'clock and my wife can come and pick my daughter at 7 o'clock. Because between 5:30 and 7 or 7:30 is the time when we don't have anyone to look after our daughter. And then I was advised by the general manager that for some regulations it cannot be done, and that's when we have switched to this monetary value is 3,000. We had 3,000 and then we wanted to increase it 5,000. Just for information to this council, I want to let everyone know that a lot of organizations now have the in-house childcare facilities as well, and they are encouraging people in respect of gender, either a female or male, that no one is disadvantaged if they have a family and they wanted to have a good family relationship. So I think I'll just leave it there. It was never about money. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saha, further discussion? Councillor Grove, sorry, Councillor Grove.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a rough idea where this debate's heading. It's pretty straightforward. My understanding is that there are still some amendments to the policy that need to be considered, most of them of a housekeeping nature. I think we've all got a pretty fixed view one way or the other on the carers arrangement. I suspect the report recommendation in that space will get up. I could be wrong, but I suspect it'll get up. So why don't we go to the points where we still have stuff to add and subtract, get some consensus around that, and then put an amendment or whatever to sort out this carers stuff and continue on with the machinery of government.
Certainly, Councillor Grove. Are there any other? Councillor Lake?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have 6 housekeeping amendments. I'm reluctant to add them to this amendment because I don't agree with aspects of that amendment. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't be dealing with each of these changes separately and in turn, just as a process, rather than trying to deal with them in globo when we all have different views. Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, you could indicate how we're going to run this through.
So what you're suggesting, Councillor Lake, is we run from the top of the document through? How many suggestions do you have?
I have 6 amendments, and I can foreshadow them, but I'm wondering whether we shouldn't just vote on each of these amendments separately. Yes, but there are quite a number of us who take objection to Councillor Rami's initial amendment.
Well, I think from a technical viewpoint, I believe you're correct, Councillor Lake, that we should. So I'm more than happy if the council wishes to vote on this current motion, because I don't have an amendment before me. Everything that that councillors have suggested so far have been accepted by the mover and the seconder. So I'm asked for any further discussion on the motion as is.
Just to if people who support the report
I will point out that that's purely what this is about, and what the document going out for public comment for 28 days to come back to the meeting on the 20th of December for council to make a consideration then. Councillor Elmore.
Question, but if the document goes out for public consultation and comes back, if council decides to vary it again, won't have to, if the variations are, I don't know what the number of variations is, but then it has to go back again, doesn't it? So let's get it right first up.
If it is substantial. So do you want to put your amendments, Councillor Lake?
If I put my amendments and they're accepted, then I'm in the difficult position of supporting only some aspects of the motion that's already been drafted, and therefore can't support my own amendments. All right. No, I understand. I'll put an amendment. I'll put my proposal. The first part of my proposal would be to omit Councillor Rami's suggestion of 1,000 and keep it as 5,000. And then I have 6 further amendments.
I'd like to hear the amendment to the motion of your.
So if we go to the document, paragraph 6.10, there they are. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Lake, for providing the.
Yeah. So these are very simple, and most of them are just typographical or housekeeping. So 6.10, it says no overseas travel will be undertaken. I'm suggesting we add the words at council's expense, because if we don't add those words, then a councillor has an opportunity to undertake travel on council business, but at the expense of a third party, they wouldn't be allowed to do it under this current policy. And I'm thinking in terms of Metropool, who sometimes send councillors overseas. So it's just to make it clear that it's not at the expense of council, the overseas travel. 6.11.1.
Sorry, Councillor Lake, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Lake. It shouldn't actually say at council's expense, because it will say no overseas travel will be undertaken at council's expense.
Yes.
Unless at council's expense.
No, the policy is that no overseas travel will be undertaken at the expense of council. So you can undertake.
It says at council's expense.
Yes, same thing. So if you are offered an opportunity as a councillor to undertake overseas travel at the expense of a third party, you can do so.
I would have actually put on there not at council's expense, unless at council law's expense. That puts the onus back on us, not the council.
No, because my example was with Metropool, who often send councillors overseas at their expense.
I understand that.
Yeah, so there's an opportunity there for a councillor to.
No problem.
Thank you.
Is that clear, Councillor Atty, or do you want me to go through it again?
Change a bit differently, because I mean there will be opportunities that we will be able to go overseas. For example, if we do have sister cities, etc., and it's not clear. I mean, it says it's at council's expense. But
it says no overseas travel will be undertaken at council's expense.
I understand that, but if there is overseas travel, it should be at the council law's expense, and that'll have the onus away from council totally. It's not obvious, but if you want to play it that way, it's fine with me.
I'll just leave what I've put. Yes.
Councillor Addy, what Councillor Lake is saying is that you're saying it's at the council law's expense, but what she's saying is in the instance of Metropool, Metropool actually pays for the councillor to go.
Yeah, I understand.
Right? So it's not the council law's expense.
I know
it's
that.
a third party's expense, and I think that's what Councillor Lake's getting to.
No, I understand that as well.
So, okay, great. So, good name.
Exactly.
Thank you, Councillor Addy.
So then we go to 6.11. It's going to be a long night. 6.11.1, it talks about representing council on a board or other third party. And the clause talks about council seeking approval to represent council on the board or the other third party, and that approval can be sought from the council via council resolution or from the mayor in accordance with section 226 of the Local Government Act. I'm proposing that the words "or from the mayor in accordance with section 226 of the Local Government Act" be deleted, which means that if a councillor wants to represent council on a board or other third party, they need to seek approval from the council via council resolution. So that's the next one. 6.16. I think is just been left there in error. It talks about the daily limits for accommodation and meal expenses outside Australia. And I think the rest of the policy makes it clear that there's no overseas travel at the expense of council. So that just should be deleted. 6 point...
No, sorry.
Yeah.
We deleted that item, but you're saying deleted from the document.
Not from... No.
Deleted from the policy document. 6.29.
6.29, if you have a look at that paragraph, there's just typographical error in that we actually get two multifunction printers that's listed twice. So I'm just saying delete the reference to the first maintained multifunction printer and keep the second reference multifunction colour laser printer, adding the word maintained, so that we get one printer and it's maintained. So it's just correcting a typo. 640. That's the carer's allowance. In this paragraph, the maximum cap is $3,000, whereas at the front of the document, the maximum cap is $5,000. So I'm just saying delete $3,000 and insert $5,000. It's just a typographical error. And 9.5 is about stationery. It's about providing people with Christmas cards and postage stamps. I'm just asking that the words "upon request" be added. I don't want to be provided with 1,000 postage stamps and then have to turn around and give them back again. I won't use them. So, and I think other councillors may not want stamps and other pieces of stationery. So just upon request. So they're my amendments, but I just ask whoever's putting those into the minutes that I'm also proposing that the carer's allowance amendment of Councillor Rami of $1,000 be deleted and it be returned to the sum of $5,000.
And I need a seconder for that, for the amendment. Well, we'll go on the call of Councillor Christo. Further discussion?
I just want to speak briefly to Councillor Rami's amendment. I just ask the councillors if they have a look around this chamber, and if you notice that out of 15 of us, there's only 2 women around the table. Now, local governments existed since the 1860s at least. I read the other day that it wasn't until 1965, not until 1965, that a woman served on a local government council in New South Wales. I feel tonight as if we've gone back to 1965. And gentlemen, I ask you to consider the need for different lifestyles to come here and be represented around the table. And I'd ask you to consider that policy relating to supporting people to attend council meetings in the evenings usually meetings that are held at least fortnightly, workshops that are often held in alternate weeks, looking at probably 1 or 2 nights a week minimum, that some people in the community, and particularly women, because the bulk of childcare still falls on women, are much disadvantaged in running for council if they have children who need care. Now, I understand Mr Sarkis's comment about the difficulties he has juggling his personal life, but with respect to him, I don't think the care of children or the disabled or the elderly really is something comparable to somebody's overseas business trip needs. I think they're quite different needs, and I think if we're going to be serious about having a council that represents its community appropriately, then we need to provide the necessary supports to have people sit around this table and participate who may need some assistance to be here. And if you look at Parliament these days, you look at federal Parliament, I understand they now have a creche, and that's a good thing. I think, you know, a council like this could probably look at some sort of similar arrangement so that we don't have to be talking about reimbursing private carers. We can actually bring our children here and have a carer care for them while our meetings are taking place. And that's not something that's beyond us, being a local council with a very large children's services department. So, you know, there are different ways of dealing with the situation. But it's not helpful to just suggest that people have to manage on their own, because then many people who have those needs will just choose not to be here, and that's not a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Councillor, well, I will give it to Councillor Garrard, and then I'll take Councillor Elmore, but I'll go to Councillor Garrard and then I'll go to the motion be put.
It will be very quick. Mr Mayor, look, I mean, when I was on council years ago and I had young children, I brought them to the council meeting. I didn't look for carers. And I don't think it really relates back to how many females are on the chamber. Our party ran 6 women for local government. I think the Labor Party ran 4. Okay, and we're lucky enough to have 2 here. So at the end of the day, I don't think the issue about discriminating against women is the point. And I think the most important issue is what the General Manager said in the workshop, that if $1,000, if 5,000 or 10,000 wasn't enough, we'd look at how we can get around it. But that's the important issue.
I have a call from Councillor Elmore that the motion be put, or the amendment, of just the item. All those in favour? Against? Declare that.
Sorry, what are you putting?
No.
It's the matter at hand.
It's the matter at hand.
Which is 175.
Yep. So the motion be put. All those in favour?
Well, the amendment.
No, the whole item. The whole item. So. No, because I just called that the motion be put. I've had a call that it's been carried. So the original mover of the original motion has right of reply.
Yeah.
Okay? So again, motion be put. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Right of reply, Councillor Rami.
Start my reply. Can I ask a question of the General Manager through you, Mr Mayor?
I'll grant that.
With $4,000 to $5,000, is there any detail around what receipts and what needs to be provided as documentation to be reimbursed? Can you just outline that, please?
Mr Mayor, my belief is that the policy does...
Yeah, excuse me, the General Manager...
I've read the document.
Okay, yeah, and the General Manager has the call. Thank you, Councillor Rami.
Without putting my finger directly on it, my understanding is the policy requires the councillors to give us evidence of the expense and we reimburse the councillor.
What's the evidence, mate? Evidence is a very broad word.
It'll be receipts for payments of service.
And from what? From a certified childcare that's set up as a childcare with the relevant ABNs, or what's the proof?
It would be evidence of receipt from someone providing childcare, looking after or other expense that councils.
As long as it's an ABN, there's no, it doesn't have to be from a dedicated childcare provider.
No.
It doesn't have to be from a qualified childcare provider.
The matter of the qualification is a matter for the council to worry about. Our job is to reimburse a legitimate expense.
Sorry, well, wait a minute. Councillor Rami has the call. Right, a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's just a few matters I'll touch on in this reply. The first point about cheap liberal points, I actually think it's other members of this chamber that are trying to get the cheap points by bringing this to a debate between male and female. Last time I recall, and it's on the audio, the beauty of live streaming, I never singled out Councillor Hamid, Councillor Lake, or any female. I said my amendment affects everyone in this chamber, male and female. The second point around comments around misogyny. Now, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's the second time last week and this week that a councillor in this chamber has accused me of being misogynist. If it continues, there'll be grounds for defamation. So there's no grounds to accuse me of being misogynist. I didn't single out any women. My amendment was to affect all councillors in this chamber. And if I was misogynist, my preferences wouldn't have gone to a female. So if that continues, further action will be taken. Councillor Campbell went on to touch on $5,000 in the scheme of 200 million. Well, that's pretty rich coming from a chamber that was discussing last week and spent 10 minutes on stamps whether it should be 300 or 100. I won't go on any further about that. I think my point's been made. I don't need to go any further. And just to touch on what Councillor Lisa Lake said, to use her words, the bulk of childcare falls on women. Now, if you want to talk about the 1860s and since 1965, it was only until then that women came into council. Well, I think you contradict yourself with a comment like that. What's to say that a male can't take on childcare duties in this day and age? So it goes exactly against your arguments around the fact that females in here...
To me, Councillor Rami.
The fact that females in here, the burden falls heavily on them. Well, we're throwing a sweeping generalisation that the male counterpart or the male partner or the female partner can't look after the children. We're in a day and age where everyone's equal and we don't throw jobs on women or men. And I'm meant to be the one that's being misogynist or generalising. So I'd just like to make that clear that comments around misogynist are not to continue. I move my motion accepting all the other points raised by Lisa Lake. As I said, other than the carer's expense, it stays on it. I move for it to stay at $1,000 and put it to the vote. All right.
That closed debate, council.
Just a clarification, Mr. Mayor. So he's accepting all of the other.
Yeah, that's fine.
All the other points that Councillor Lake's put forward. Okay.
All right.
I want them dealt with as a separate amendment, Mr. Mayor, because
they will be, Councillor Lake, because I'll have to put the amendment, your amendment first, and then if that's defeated, then it'll go to Councillor Rami's motion. Councillor Sarkis for clarification.
Mayor, it is a clarification, and I believe this clarification needs to be sought because there was some points raised by Councillor Garrard with respect to the Mayor and his capabilities and other bits and pieces that were put forward. I don't know where they fell into the motion. I'm hoping they did fall into the motion that Councillor Rami moved. Yeah. Just want to make sure that they are in there. If not, he may need to reconsider or whatever the case may be through you.
I believe through the General Manager that they are part of it. Okay, I'll now put the amendment that was moved. Councillor Lake, seconded Councillor Christo, and I'll call for a division. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Councillor Elmore, Councillor Huang, Councillor Lake, Councillor Saha, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christo, Councillor Campbell, Councillor Grove, Councillor Zada, and Councillor Cummings. Those against? Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Rami, and Councillor Addy's abstaining. The amendment becomes the motion. All those in favour of the motion? Aye. Against?
Against.
I declare that carried. Name recorded.
Yeah, fine.
So Councillor Rami, name recorded.
Mr Mayor, as a matter arising, if I may.
Councillor Addy.
Just as a matter arising from the last motion, I know there's a few changes I want to make, but I didn't want to actually add it to the list and have a massive confusion-based, shameful speaking councillors, etc., etc., etc. But, Mr Mayor, item 6.34 is part of the actual expense policy. It refers to your mobile phone and data allowances. That actually contradicts item 6.3, which explains that the general market price of a handset and an allowance is $150 per month. Now, I did some research myself on the weekend, and for $120 a month, you'll actually get almost 6 times the amount of data. So I don't know how this cost came about, and I think we should be changing 6.34. I know that Councillor Lake, I think it was part of hers to change as well, or was another one, I can't remember exactly. There's so much speaking with respect of...
We did, and unfortunately, unless there's a rescission, then I would suggest to Councillor Addy that he needs to make a submission during the public notice period.
Well, Mr Mayor, if with great respects, the items I'm referring to were actually not part of any of that motion that was changed. They're actually totally different.
No, I understand that, but what Council has done has put that document
Correct.
out for public.
Well, it hasn't just yet. There is still time to actually rescind the motion.
Correct. And that's unfortunately...
So if you want to handle it that way and then have issues that conflict in that document, I don't have a problem.
Can I just ask, I mean, if it's a typographical, I'm sure by consent we can get things sorted.
It's not just typographical. There's actually an anomaly with respect to the amounts that they're referred to on some matters. And I did have some matters which Council Lake did change.
The actual matter at hand. We can recommit it and have a further amendment taking on all the things that were passed by Councillor Lake just a moment ago.
Well, you've got to rescind it first.
Well, I'd have to take a rescission, I believe.
Can we just try and understand the point, Councillor Addy's point first? Perhaps we can have a discussion and it may not be an issue.
Councillor Addy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, as I was saying, looking at the data allowances that we have with respect of the items, the mobile phone plan. Now, can you let me get this forward a bit. Now, I understand that in 6.3, the actual report states that it is $150 per month in lieu of council's issued device, etc., if we wish to go to our own devices. Yeah, 6.30. 6.30. 6.30.
Yeah, 30, thank you. Yep. Page 7 or page 25. Page 7 of the actual document, page 25 of the whole paper.
Yes. So, Mr Mayor, I did some research yesterday, and for an amount of $30 less than that, we can actually obtain 6 times more data allowance. Well, which this leads to the fact that I know that today's day and age, now, a gig was a huge amount 10 years ago, but today 100 gigs is not enough, so to speak. Yeah, but it says up to 15 gig. It says up to $150 per month, but then it also is capped in 6.34 at 15 gig per month data allowance.
But isn't that the plan? No, isn't that the plan that the council gives to us? That's different.
Mr Mayor, I understand that, and I understand there is a mobile phone plan that council will include the following, etc., etc. But what I'm trying to say is that we can actually do a lot better for the same money or less. That's what I'm trying to say.
We're going to go through this again in a couple of months' time. So.
Yeah, well, you said earlier it was better to get it right the first time.
Let's do it now.
Well, you can't do it now.
If you wait a minute, the Councillor Sarkis, you want to ask a question of Councillor Addy?
Yeah, and a clarification through you, perhaps to the General Manager or whoever may be able to answer this. If one of us was away for any particular reason at a conference or interstate, whatever, we weren't able to make a council meeting, yet we wanted to watch it on our device and live stream it. I'm only guessing that that's going to take a fair few gigs to live stream a council meeting, particularly if it goes from 6:30 till 10 o'clock, with no further extensions from 10 o'clock. You might use your whole 15 gigs on that one night. I think what Councillor Addy's put forward, Mr Mayor, is a brilliant suggestion, in that you can get for $120 6 times the amount of data of 15 gigs
and still be
less than $150. So we shouldn't be capping, I think, 15 gigs at $150, because at $150 you can get a heck of a lot more than 15 gigs.
It is.
Well, it is. In item 6.34, as an indication, council's councillor mobile phone plan will include the following: 15 gigabytes monthly data allowance. That's it. Correct. So I'm happy to sign a rescission right now with Councillor Addy if that's what he wants and put it forward, but I think it's ludicrous. We should be able to just accept this and move on.
Distance, and you may or may not wish to refer this to the General Manager. If a submission on this policy is requested, asking to clear up what Councillor Addy has identified as an anomaly, is this a change so significant that it requires exhibition again, or will this be able to be adopted as part of the changes if Council was to consider that change after the 28-day exhibition period?
Mr Ryan.
The latter, Mr Mayor. The matters refer to two different things. The first one 630 deals with your choice to use your own phone, and we'll pay $150 a month for that use. The second provision, 6.34, is us providing a phone to you for your use, and it's an indication what it will contain. It may contain a much higher monthly allowance, depends what we can buy for the price.
Yet it's capped in the actual policy.
So Mr Ryan, what you're saying is if the submission's received, making the point that Councillor Addy is making, that we won't, if we clear it up at that point, have to re-exhibit?
No, Mr Mayor, I don't believe we need to re-exhibit, because this essential allocation is a phone to the councillor at $150 a month for your private use, or a phone supplied by us with no charge on it.
Yes, thank you. Question?
Councillor Campbell.
Through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager, do I understand that 15 gig monthly data allowance to be a minimum rather than a cap? Is that correct?
Mr Ryan.
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Addy.
Well, what are we doing? Are we actually...
15 gig was the minimum?
No, the maximum.
So wait a minute, Mr Ryan, just for clarification, if what I've taken is correct, you've indicated that wouldn't have to go out for re-exhibition?
Correct, Mr Mayor. If I draw the Council's attention to 6.36, the mobile phone plan is going to change as we buy and trade mobile phone plans. And we will supply at least 15 gigabytes and unlimited standard calls to Council. It may be that we give 300 gigabytes because that's what we buy for the same price. It's a matter what the market delivers to us.
Mr Mayor, I take that on board, but it actually clearly states that it's an allowance of 15 gig and that's it. So why don't we just remove the 15 gig and have it wherever the council can grab?
I believe what the General Manager, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr General Manager, is that if he gets a submission to that effect, it will it will not have to be re-advertised.
Look, that's fine then.
Thank you.
In addition to that, Mr Mayor, there's only one other item. All the rest, like I said, have been changed by Councillor Lake. It's funny how we've got almost the same things here.
Might be a similar sort of outlet.
Possibly. Not saying that anything's wrong with that, because I think Councillor Lake is quite an intelligent person, so we probably think the same. In the appendix under definitions.
I'm just allowing, we mightn't have enough in Councillor Elmore, but I just want to finish this subject if we can.
Councillor Moore, if you'd like to go have a cup of coffee for our next 5 minutes, fine with me.
That's all right. Well, let's work our way through it. Councillor Addy.
Mr Mayor, under definitions, there is on the appendix 2 under definitions, there is a definition of what official business is. And what I'd like to know is a clarification through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. Under definitions, it says that official business means functions that the Mayor or Council are required to invite, etc., etc., etc. And the last item says meetings, functions, workshops and other events to which attendance by council has been requested or approved by council. Now, does that mean that council has to approve every single function that we get invited to or not?
Mr. Ryan?
Mr Mayor, it's an or, so it could be in circumstances, I think Councillor Sarkis mentioned, that we may be requested by the state or federal government to have the mayor and deputy mayor attend some function somewhere. That will be covered, that's defined as official business.
I understand that, but what I'm referring to is, through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager, is that, just say for argument's sake, we get an invitation from a local association. It says he has been requested or approved by council. That means that they have to be requested and approved by council at all times, or does that, do we need to clarify that point?
Mr. Ryan?
No, I read that as or, so there can be a request or can be approved by council.
But also, can also read as requested or approved.
Well, we can clarify that through the exhibition period.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. So you...
And I believe that's really about it, yes.
You don't require then a matter of rising, Councillor Addy?
No, if it's okay with what we can change, that's not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, Council.
You're welcome.
We'll probably keep plowing ahead, I think, for now. Council 176/17, Council Committee Overview.
I'll move the recommendation with a number of amendments.
Move Councillor Lake. Is
Thank
there
you.
a second for that? Or would we, Council, like to hear the amendments first? I think would be appropriate.
Yes, I did provide them for the minute writer, and I did give a copy to Councillor Grove. I don't know if they've had a chance to have a look at them. The business paper annexes a number of terms of reference for the various committees. My first change is in relation to a paragraph that appears both in the floodplains committee terms of reference and the ATSIC committee terms of reference. In the floodplains, it's paragraph 21, Roman numeral 2, where I've said that we should omit general manager and insert council. The clause relates to the ability to amend the terms of reference. Seeing council is adopting the terms of reference, then I believe that any amendment should also come back for the approval of council and not rest with the general manager. And so I propose that amendment in the floodplain terms of reference, the ATSIC terms of reference, and also a paragraph that appears similar one in the Heritage Committee terms of reference. So that's the first amendment. I then wish to propose an amendment to the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Charter, which is attached to our business paper, but not put to us for an adoption. The business paper tells us that it was already adopted by the administrator. I've had a look at that committee charter. I've also had a discussion with Councillor Zeta about that committee charter. I understand that there's a feeling of, I won't say unanimous, but a general feeling that there should be 2 councillors on the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee rather than 1. There's 3 external members. 2 councillors will still mean that the 3 external members are in the majority, which is government policy. But we believe that having 2 councillors at the table would be of benefit to the council, because it means, report back to the council as to that charter, as to that committee's activities. You will get 2 points of view rather than 1. And so we also think that having 2 councillors on the committee will enable that committee to work better. 5 members is better than 4 on any committee, I think. There are some words in the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee Charter. They're actually there by way of, they're not a clause that has any effect. They're just there to elucidate, I suppose. But I propose that those words be omitted from the charter. They say that the current external members should remain on the committee until the election period in September 2019. Now, those committee members, I understand, were appointed in October 2016, and that the term in the charter is for 2 years, so that their term would expire in October 2018. I think that that is the time that they expire. There is an opportunity for them to apply to resit a further term, and they should take that opportunity in October 2018. So I believe that those words that the current members stay on until September 2019 should be deleted. The recommendations where they're talking about adopting the various terms of reference and then talking about nominating councillors for membership, I think we should add a G, the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. It's not there. There are no councillors been appointed to that committee yet, so that should be done. Yep.
So
if any of that's unclear, I'm happy to explain further.
With those suggested amendments, I will ask for a second because I don't have a second. Councillor Zeta. Councillor Garrard.
Mayor, I too had some on-the-run changes through this document. 176/17, when talking about the Heritage Committee, I'm requesting that it would meet forthwith, as it states, or as required, those words we introduced. In terms of the terms of reference, the Heritage Committee, Latin item 8, that the committee is to be included, that the committee will offer advice as required upon development applications received by council where it is considered that the DA has significant impact upon a heritage item. And I'm suggesting that because there are statutory issues around heritage, and if we have a heritage committee, it should indeed be responsible for those matters that are certainly going to arise within Cumberland. Further, in terms of the terms of reference, that the mayor or his nominee will be the chairperson, and in his absence, the chair is to be elected by the committee. I'm saying this in terms of the floodplain committee as well. I think naturally the mayor is the chairman of any committee, and if he wishes to nominate a person to be the chair, so be it. But failing that, I don't think it should go back to a council officer or necessarily to another councillor. I think if you're going to have committees, and if we're doing it for the right reason, to give the community as much responsibility as possible, well then why not allow the committee to be chaired by a community person? And I think that should be a very basic statement that's coming out of this. So I'm requesting that the mayor or his nominee would be chairperson, or in his absence, the chair to be elected by the committee, that in relation to heritage and flood prone. In terms of the traffic committee, the mayor or his nominee should chair the meeting, and in his absence, the meeting to be chaired by the group manager. So that's only a slight change to the operation. Well, it's very difficult to under the terms of reference for traffic committee, it just says, you know, how you elect the chair. Same for heritage, same for floodplain. So I've made the same alteration through there. And the other matter relating to the heritage committee in terms of reference. I've handed those over to the clerk, and they should be on the screen somewhere.
Councillor Lake, when you cite them, do you accept those changes?
I don't have a problem with any of the changes, except there's a technical issue, I think, in relation to the council referring DAs to the Heritage Committee, because DAs are no longer coming into council. So,
no, I just point of explanation. I would suggest that if it's in the terms of reference for the Heritage Committee to handle matters that that may be associated with the DA and heritage, well, clearly the council officers in the processing of that document would find some necessity to ask for comment from the Heritage Committee.
Yes.
Not necessarily.
So just a change in the words. Okay. It's general. It's advice that's required. It doesn't say required from whom.
So if you're going to build 10 stories next to Linwood, well, you might want to get some comment from the Heritage Committee, right?
Okay, so you've accepted that. Councillor Zeta, you've accepted it. Councillor Addy, you...
I just want to see where Councillor there's a notation there about the metropole, or whatever it's called now. I think it's a bit higher up now. It says that the mayor and instead of council? Yes. Council. Council. Council or one council. Two more councils, just one council. For you, Mr. Mayor, hasn't the mayor always been on that committee, or is this requisite to the other committee?
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, the council can nominate its representative. It's traditional that it's the mayor, but it doesn't not required to be. The person has to undergo training required by that board, but it can be any councillor.
Well, Mr. Mayor, if it's an issue with regards to going to training, I think we should change it back to
Would the mover and the seconder accept that?
I'm sorry. Which paragraph amendment are you talking about, Councillor Atty?
The two insurance institutions.
Yeah, I'm not amending anything to do with those at all.
Councillor Grove. Councillor Grove, Michael.
I would happily support Councillor Lake's motion with an amendment. Quite happy to let Councillor Lake finish first, but I would be seeking to ensure that the delegate to the two new Metropole organisations, Civic Risk, that they be vested in the office of Mayor. Not necessarily you as the delegate, but whoever is mayor at the time has the first right of refusal for those positions.
So mayor will nominate.
I don't have a problem with that, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot of training involved in attending those things. Yeah.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Be I so bold, are we going to pick the actual representatives now, Councillor?
Mayor or nominee, I'm assuming the nominee will be a councillor.
Correct.
It has to be a councillor.
It has to be a councillor. Yep.
Could I propose we put this motion through first and then deal with...
And then, all right, I'll take that. It's given. If there's no further discussion. Okay. When we're right? We're right. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, we're going to go for the delegates.
With respect to the committees we've just resolved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I do have suggestions that have been put to me, and I have nominations for the Heritage Committee, which there are 3 places, 3 councillor places, and I have a suggestion for Councillor Lake and Councillor Campbell. Is there a third? Councillor Garrard. Are there any other interested councillors? No, but if someone, then we're going to have to go to a vote. But no. All right. Well, I'll settle. Do you want me to do them in block or?
Just do that one done. Yeah.
Okay. All those in favour? Those against? Declare it carried.
Still get 2,000 No, it's actually 5,000.
We have
You get some good sausage rolls.
The ASIC committee, and I have a nomination for Councillor Elmore. And if there's no other council interested, I'd be interested in going on that. Okay, so all those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Floodplains, we have 2 positions, and I have a nomination for Councillor Elmore. Is there any other? Councillor Sarkis? Any others?
They're going to deal with the pipe head issue? Or?
Well, we don't know. No, I don't think so. That's not a flood issue. It's generally high ground. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare it carried. Traffic, I have 1 position, and I have Councillor Saha. Any other nominations? No other nominations? Councillor Garrard?
There is only 1 position there, but you can be a delegate from your local state member, I understand, as
That's
well.
correct.
They've got more than 1.
May I suggest that in the effort of cooperation in the chamber, that we let Councillor Garrard have this, and I'm sure Councillor Saha will be able to be a representative of a local member. I'll put it then. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Yes, the next 2 are okay. Audit, risk and improvement charter. I have 2 positions now when it goes through, and that's Councillor Lake and Councillor Zeta. No others? There's no others. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Out Councillor Grove, we have Campbell, Lake, Huang, Grove, Garrard, Christo, Sarkis, Zarika, Hamid and myself.
Okay, so I'm not so crass as to nominate councillors for the punt, but I will nominate Councillor Lake's initial 5. They're pretty easy to identify. Plus Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Grove and Councillor Atty.
So number 1.
For number 1, well, look, I really don't think that you should be voting if you're not going to turn up to the conference. But we can address that as a separate item.
Sorry?
And so, yourself is number 11, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming you're going.
I am. Yep.
Yeah, it'd probably be good to give the mayor a vote from time to time. For number 2, those same names minus yourself.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
Can we just confirm?
Sarkis,
Yeah.
Well, Mrs. Zeta.
Yeah.
2 to 3.
Councillor Zeta, you're on number 1.
No, sorry.
Council, do we need any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, could you please remove my name from number one?
Councillor Addy would like his name removed from number 1.
Okay. That's what I requested in the beginning.
All right. Are there any other changes? No, I don't think. Councillor Elmore, you're unavailable, I believe. Yep.
It's their motion, that's all.
Who moved it?
Making Elmore.
So there is,
Sorry.
There is no amendment.
Yep. There's no amendment. So, Councillor Lake, do you accept that as is? Councillor Elmore,
That's
do you
a good
accept
package, thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Leave the last item and the one prior to it and do them at the end. So with your permission, I'll put up notice of motion 178/17, proposed city status for Cumberland Council, and that is moved by Councillor Sarkis, I take it, and Councillor Garrard. Is any who would like to move and second?
Sure. As it's written, Mr. Mayor.
As it's written. Councillor Sarkis, you have the call.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I brought this up last meeting, and that was, we had two city councils, more or less, that were brought together to make one much larger city council, but it's been given the name of council without city. It's almost saying we're between Fairfield City and Parramatta City, but we're not a city. And I think it's taking away from our status. The Cumberland Council, as it stands today, is a massive city. In fact, it's two cities and a bit being brought together, and a quarter, and a bit, and a quarter, 1/5 to be precise. And it's been brought into one massive LGA. But then we've had the title of city taken away from our, yet our logo has 3 C's, which would, to me, depict Cumberland City Council. It's on all our logos, whether it's on the street, on our website, and I think, Mr. Mayor, we should bring that up and have Cumberland formerly known as a city, so it would be Cumberland City Council, hence the motion put forward, Mr. Mayor.
Further discussion, Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I support the motion and believe that it should be supported unanimously by this chamber. The logo, yes, it does support the 3C concept, and putting the term city there is a no-brainer. When council went through this process last year and the administrator was in charge of that, this matter was raised at the representative committee that existed. It was deemed by the administrator that it was too hard a job, something that somebody else could look after, probably us, as we go into the future. But I am concerned about also the belong and succeed. I'm not too certain where all that comes from. And hence the resolution is also asking for the papers that, committed us to this statement and to the theory behind where we are at the moment, come back to the workshop and let's go over that and just see whether that's the best way forward. I think I've had a lot of comment from the community about just what is behind the words belong and succeed. Why aren't they something else? Well, I don't know. I haven't seen the paperwork. We were never given any documentation on the committee that we were on. And apart from getting an overview before the process started, that's about where it started and where it finished. So at the moment, we've got a logo, and I appreciate we've paid very big money for what we've got. I'm not willing to see, or not anxious to see council spend a large amount of money moving on from this position, but we do need to readdress it. The internal comments, and I think all of us too should be educating ourselves so that we can take it back to the community, just what's behind the endeavour that's been brought forward by the consultants.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Hammond.
I've got a question. I'm assuming signs will have to be changed. No?
All that's displayed.
So street signs won't have to be.
Well, Councillor Sarkis, but I might add, yeah, as far as my take, and I'll take correction from the appropriate officers, the street signs, if we run with the same symbol, and that's up to council, but something like the sign on the front of this building, you just have to have city, correct, add city, so I don't think it'd be a great expense, but I'll take advice.
And the other question I had is, how is this beneficial to the average resident?
Councillor Sarkis.
Mr. Mayor, it's a status when people ask you where you're from, and residents express this through when Holroyd was a municipality and it changed to a city council. People said, where are you from? And we were from the municipality of Holroyd. And we were from the city of Holroyd. There was a big difference when, not so much if you're within the city, but as soon as you go out to Parramatta to city and they ask you where you're from, this is where the difference comes in. We're squeezed in between Parramatta and Fairfield, but we're not squeezed because we're massive, right? But yet we haven't got that title for our residents, and I think that takes away from them when they put their 149 certificates forward, when they're selling a property, when they're buying I think it all falls in when you've got city on your title or you don't. It's a big difference to many people. It might not be to you or to me, but it is for a lot of people. The reason I brought it up, Mr. Mayor, is I've had a number of people say to me, how come you had two cities come together? And that's why I ran with that. You had two cities come together and then the city's gone. Well, where's it gone? Yet I had a look at our logo, and the logos on the street signs are all CCC. So there's not much expense there, but there will be an expense, albeit it won't be that big, inside the council chamber, outside the council building. And letterheads, well, you print them as you go along, so it's not a big thing, really.
Councillor Saha.
Thank you.
Up to you.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, when Parramatta, the city of Parramatta, Blacktown is a city, Fairfield is a city, I think Bankstown is a city as well, and becoming two councils together and bit of Parramatta, I think it makes sense that if we become a city. But I think that's not the point. The point is the logo itself we put, the CCC. A lot of people in the community, they're asking, I mean, does this logo represents our community? I mean, for me, it could be like Cumberland Cricket Club, or probably for someone it's like corporation and company. So I think it opens up not only that adding city, because if you do it, then yes, you need to change all the signs, all the logos, all the letterhead, but I think it goes beyond that. So isn't it opens up a point that we should really ask the general manager probably what this logo represents, and probably going back to the community that what they really want to see in the Cumberland Council logo. Because when I see the Parramatta Council logo, you see the Blacktown Council logo, I think they have something significant in their logo about the community. I mean, if I remember the Parramatta Council, I think they have some Aboriginal people hunting. So that represents the community culture and heritage. I think our Triple C, actually for me, it doesn't tell me anything. So I just want to request Councillor Sarkis, isn't it probably a time that we think about the whole branding, that how the Cumberland Council, Cumberland City Council and Cumberland logo as a package rather than just adding city to it.
Mr. Mayor, I believe number 2 actually covers that.
Maybe you just run number 2.
Have a workshop over the branding of the entire, and also have documentation, everything else come on board.
But then we delete probably, then we probably delete number 1 and just go with number 2.
No, that's correct. Mr. Mayor, can't have.
So, I've got councillors,
He's turned off. Mr. Mayor, if I may, I mean, there's no harm in adopting city because that is irrelevant to whether it's a Triple C or not. I mean, you can call it Addie's Cumberland Council, Macadam Triple C, I don't care. But I believe that having city in there now is not going to harm anything. At the same time, we're also requesting, well, not I, but Councillor Sarkis is requesting to have a workshop around the branding of the council and also bring back documentation as to how we got to this stage in the first place.
True.
So it's actually covering that in the same place. So whatever comes out of the workshop will resolve.
I've got Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Lake, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think this whole motion is silly, and I don't know why we're wasting council time talking about such nonsense. Putting in the word city doesn't deliver anything to anybody. I don't think people care about this. The average person, if you ask them what a city is...
Councillor Garrett.
Point of order. We're not putting in the word city, we're acknowledging that Cumberland is a city.
It's not a point of order.
Microphone, please, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Campbell, could you?
I will talk about the logo in a minute, but to use the word city in relation to Cumberland is quite silly. Most people, if you ask them what a city is, it's an urban population surrounded by a non-urban area. I know in local government circles and bureaucratic circles that the word city is used in a much more arbitrary manner. So what?
Interestingly, what the learned councillor might be able to tell me why Auburn was a municipality before it became a city.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. This is not a point of order. He is arguing. He wants to debate the issue, and he hasn't got the patience to wait his turn.
Councillor Campbell, I do take it as a bit of an affront to call something silly when 2 councillors have moved and seconded it. So I think if we, in the spirit of the chamber, if we can just debate the issue and you know, if it's there on the books, I just expect us to have a bit of a civil conversation, a civil debate, rather than criticising what's put forward. So you have the call, Councillor Campbell.
All right, I'll withdraw that, Mr. Mayor, and I'll say I disagree with it. I can't see the point. Someone remind me where I was up to. If we're going to give a title to it, it might be the conglomeration of Cumberland. It's a random collection of suburbs thrown together with an arbitrary line drawn around them. There's no geographical delineation to this. It's just an arbitrary line on a map, a few suburbs thrown together. The government could have chosen different suburbs differently, and you want to call this a city? So I just think it's meaningless to do that. It's a bureaucratic game. As for the logo, I don't know why people got so excited about having a logo. Yes, they're pretty colours, for sure. CCC is also the logo of the Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission, and I don't know why that was chosen. It's also the logo of a number of private companies around the place. Keep an eye out for it and you'll see. And I don't know how much money the Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission paid for the logo. It would have been sensible to have had if you have to have a logo, that is, it would have been sensible to have a competition amongst local people. It might have gone to a local artist, it might have gone to a high school student with a bit of an artistic bent, and I'm sure they could have come up with something a bit more interesting than the 3 Cs. I don't think that we should be wasting money on branding. I don't think we should be changing the street signs so that people who go up and stand on a stool and have a close look see that it's the City of Auburn or the City of Cumberland. Who cares, as long as the name of the street is correct. And if any money's to be spent on street signs, please spend them putting street signs at those intersections that don't have any, so you don't have to keep driving indefinitely to find out where you are. Let's not be obsessed with this sort of trivia. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I do have Councillor Lake, Councillor Rami, but before I do, and I'll try not to enter the debate, I can remember very well, and there was a recommend guidelines. That's correct. I remember the document guidelines and how an administrator, in the case of merging councils, should go about having consultation with the community. And it was actually in that same document that in theirs was that it maybe should be suggested that the community should have been involved in the actual naming of the new merged council. But unfortunately, a lot of that document was chose to be ignored by the then administrator. So obviously it wasn't a code, or they were only guidelines. So having said that, I've got Councillor Lake and then Councillor Rami.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've really just got a question through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. When this motion came up on the business paper, I scratched my head and thought, well, maybe there's a legislative reason why, when the proclamations came through in May 2016, Parramatta was given City of Parramatta and Cumberland was just given Cumberland status. And I tried to find relevant legislation about what constitutes a city under our planning and boundary processes in New South Wales, and I couldn't find anything. All I could find was a little historical document about when Holroyd was made a city back in 1991, and the old Local Government Act of 1919 actually had a provision that gave the New South Wales government a discretion to change something from a municipality to a city, and it set out the criteria for what you had to meet in order to be able to make a submission to become a city. Now that act has gone and been replaced by the new Local Government Act, which doesn't mention the word city at all. So I'm just wondering whether the General Manager has any clues as to what guided the proclamations at the time and why some council areas were given city status and others not.
Mr Ryan.
Mr Mayor, my understanding of the Local Government Act is a provision that the Governor may declare any area a city. That's all it says. As to how we make a submission, I'll have to be guided by the Office of Local Government. My understanding of all the proclamations that created new councils, none of them were nominated city, except Parramatta, which had that in its title, and they reversed it from Parramatta City to the City of Parramatta. None of the other amalgamated councils had the city title used, and our name is set in the proclamation.
I got Councillor Rami, then Councillor Grove. Councillor Rami.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Microphone. Through you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick point around this discussion. I believe that our job as councillors as well is to propel and to promote and to elevate our city, our LGA, our agglomeration of suburbs with the arbitrary line, whatever you want to call it, to try and represent that in the highest of lights and the highest of esteem. After hearing some of the comments here tonight, like I question some of the pride that councillors have in the area they're representing. We should be advocates of this area and trying to push the boundaries in terms of what this area is referred to and how it's viewed by surrounding LGAs. So yeah, I'm just a bit confused, to be honest, but I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Grove and then Councillor Zareka.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't fully agree with this motion, but I'm likely to back it anyway. Here's why. Look, I think it's good to have an aspiration for your council and where you want it to be. And I think particularly in these formative meetings of the new council, I think, there are council laws. This applies across the state. I'm not trying to identify anyone here because I don't think we have the information to draw those conclusions at this stage. But there are councillors who'll define themselves by what they're for, and there are councillors who will define themselves by what they're against. It's very, very clear over time. You'll realise that people have a trend, a strong leniency to be either, proactive or reactive to things. And I think that, the big picture approach to where Cumberland is, where Cumberland's place is in the broader in the world, in the broader Sydney metropolitan region, I think that's an important discussion to have. Do I think we're a city? At this stage, I'd be reluctant to say yes. I think Holroyd might have been a city. I think Auburn certainly was a city. I don't even think we're a community in this place. I think we're a service provider. I think we should aspire to provide excellent services. I think we should aspire to not only provide excellent services, but provide excellent regional leadership to the people we serve and the surrounding areas. That's why we move motions around light rail and broader strategic planning. And that's why I think it's important to get behind motions like this. Now, where this conversation ends, there are a number of ways to change the name of a city, all of which require an ongoing discussion. So, where I sit right now, I'm quite happy to at least kick off this discussion and see where this goes in the future. I don't suspect that us writing a letter to the Minister asking for a new proclamation of a name is necessarily going to get the job done. But I think it's a good starting point to say, well, on the issue of the name, are we happy with it? Are we happy with how we're positioned by the government and by the former administrator, and particularly with the branding stuff? Look, a lot of people have mixed views about the logo, but the logo is not just the brand. The brand is more than the logo. The brand is how we're perceived and who we are within the community. I think we need to have a real discussion as a newly elected council about where we sit in that picture. And I commend Councillor Garrard for the motion, and I hope to be part of the workshop going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Grove. Councillor Zarica.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We're on. Councillor Grove has stolen my thunder, I think. I was waiting and waiting, and then all of a sudden, only to lose it at the last moment.
It's your fault for being polite.
No problem. I would concur with Councillor Grove and mirror his comments, but I'd add the amendment to the motion that we actually ask for a report on, number one, costing, and number two, how to do it, because it seems like we don't know how it's done.
I think that's quite reasonable suggestion, Councillor Zarica. One might. Would it be advisable to go before the
process?
Then, Councillor Sarkis, you've heard that suggestion. Would you like to just add the words "in principle" to the item 1?
Sure.
Councillor Garrard, would you be willing to accept that?
Well, certainly is my principle.
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, can I just add methods and processes to be followed?
In item 3?
Yep.
I mean, Kevin, if the bank's just added it.
Yeah.
You can go through this debate.
You can ask Nike for that. They've registered it. He said, just do it.
Sorry, Councillor, you wanted on item 3?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Methods and processes.
Methods and processes to be followed.
Followed.
Did you know we're filling in time because we don't do PAs anymore? Yeah, I thought so.
All right, that's acceptable. Any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour? Against? I believe the ayes have it. Show of hands is called for a division if you want, which normally two councillors have to stand, but I'll call for the division. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Garrard. Councillor Garrard, Sarkis, sorry.
Well, it was a procedural thing, and Mr. Mayor, there's been a lot of talk about Cumberland City Council, the City of Cumberland. My motion asks that we consider the title of city be implemented in the logo, whether it's City of Cumberland or Cumberland City is something that we can go through in point 2 if accepted. Point 2, Mr. Mayor, is asking that we have at our workshop when we're away on the weekend that we discuss this, and I think that's what we spoke about informally with some of the council staff last week, that we'd actually bring it up to the workshop and we can talk about the logo, the name and how we go about it. I appreciate that Councillor Drake has brought up a few good points, and that's why we've taken them on. Mr. Mayor, in the last council that was in this chamber, that was Holroyd City Council, we went through a procedure to change the logo. I'm sure Councillor Lake, yourself, Councillor Grove, Councillor Zeta, and Ms. Whitfield that's sitting today in the gallery, Mr. Mayor, we all played a massive role in putting a logo which resembled our city and a slogan that went with it. No consideration has been given here. It's also been said that Canterbury Council or Canterbury Bankstown Council has just added the word city into their local government area with no consultation. They did it because it was in the best interests of the city. There is a reason, there is a purpose, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, if you look at Cumberland, on all our 149 certificates, formerly Holroyd or Auburn were in the county of Cumberland. They're in the county of Cumberland. In the county of Cumberland, which was put together in the 1940s, there was 10 councils that made up the county of Cumberland. And there was 10 councillors in each one of those counties that contributed to the county of Cumberland. There wasn't a county of Cumberland council, but it was a compilation of councillors from the 10 different councils that ranged from Sydney to the Lower Blue Mountains. We're dead smack in the middle. So we have a name of Cumberland. I think it's a good name for where we are because we're dead smack in the middle of the county of Cumberland. But we are a city in our own right. Our numbers prove that. Our buildings, our shopping centres, our infrastructure is proving that. The only thing we're lacking, Mr. Mayor, is it being incorporated into the name, hence the motion. I think it's a positive step forward. What it is asking, now with point 1 being changed, that council provide in principle support to the change. It's not saying let's go for it 100%. In principle support, let's have a look at these reports, the methods, the procedures, the costs involved, and then we'll go from there. I don't think it's asking too much, Mr. Mayor, of this council to consider a step forward for the entire LGA. So I'm assuming that everybody's going to support this, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sarkis, that closes debate, and I see that we need a division, so I'll call a division. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Grove, Councillor Rami, Councillor Zarika, Councillor Addy, Councillor Saha and Councillor Cummings. Those against, Councillor Elmore, Councillor Cohen, Councillor Lake, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christo, Councillor Campbell. I declare it carried. Council, we've got in line with item 177 and 179, the draft code of meeting practice, and that it was being suggested, and I took that advice, that we combine the two. I'm open to...
Mr. Mayor, maybe if I can,
Thank you,
the easiest way to do it probably is to just move the notice of motion that appears at 17917.
Okay,
Except
so
it's proposed amendments, not porpoised amendments.
Okay, so notice of motion 179. And that was put forward by Councillor Lake and Councillor Hammond. Councillor Lake, are you moving it?
Yes, thank you.
And Councillor Hammond, are you seconding it? Councillor Lake, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. At the last meeting on a resolution of Councillor Atty, Council resolved to meet fortnightly rather than monthly. So point 1A merely inserts the necessary amendments to achieve that. I understand Councillor Atty's not happy, so he'll indicate something different in an amendment, but it's a starting point. Many amendments. Point B reinserts the opening prayer and the national anthem into the order of business. Point C reinserts an opportunity for members of the public to address council on matters that are not on that night's agenda, but more broadly relate to matters of policy services, regulatory functions or issues of community concern. Point D repositions what is currently called public forum in the 2nd of August version of the Code of Meeting Practice. It transfers it to a new paragraph which more accurately refers to that segment as, I gave it the heading, Public Address to Council concerning matters on the Council agenda. Then point 2 is just process. It covers the requirement for public exhibition of the draft amended code. And importantly, it points out that whilst the document only needs to be exhibited for 28 days, it actually has to be, public comment has to be received for 42 days. And that's the legislative requirement. And point 3 requires the matter to return to council at a December meeting. I think one's currently scheduled for the 20th of December. That would allow the 42 days to run and give sufficient time for public comment and a business paper to be prepared. So to start off these amendments, I'll just speak to the ones I'm proposing. I won't speak to Councillor Atty's, so I'll leave that to him to address. So the first change after that is firstly the prayer. I'm not a religious person myself, but I'm moving this be reinserted for the following reasons. We are the council of a very religious community. Census 2016 tells us that from a total population of about 216,000, only 30,000 or about 14% stated that they had no religion. About 40% nominated a Christian religion. About 38% nominated a non-Christian religion. 0.3% said they had what they called a non-classifiable religious belief, and 8% chose not to answer the question at all. So we can say at least 80% of our community profess a religion. That's much higher than many of the other council areas. As a councillor, I think it's part of my duty to acknowledge that. And like all councillors here, many of my activities within the community, particularly the ward that I represent, involve supporting religious organisations in the events that they hold, and also the many different social services they provide to the people of Cumberland. This is a personal thing, but to me, having prayer at the commencement of each meeting is a gesture of the goodwill that flows from the myriad of religious communities that are active in Cumberland, back to us as councillors. I always feel supported in my work when someone with a religious belief chooses to pray for me. I consider that to be their gift to me, and I don't think it should be disrespected. Now, the prayer was removed from the Cumberland Code of Meeting Practice by our administrator on the 2nd of August, following a 28-day period of public consultation in which not a single person commented on the change. It was done as part of a large package of amendments to 8 major codes and policies, and the details of all of these amendments were never highlighted, which explains to me why no comment on the removal of prayer was received. People just didn't notice it was being done. And this raises a separate and important issue, Mr Mayor, about how proposed amendments to documents should be publicly exhibited. I believe they need to be accompanied by an explanatory note, in the same way that bills are presented in Parliament, so that people, technical amendments, the removal of a word, the insertion of a paragraph, these things should be explained. The document shouldn't just be put out without any explanation or guidance. In relation to the national anthem, I'm no fan of the tune. I usually start too high and then I can never reach the high notes. but I like the words, they're fine. And a brief verse of communal singing around love of country, I think, is a bonding exercise. And it reminds us that we're here as a unit of government to undertake a civic role. We're not a corporate body. And so I believe that the national anthem has a place.
Can I call for an extension? Moved Councillor Rami, seconded Councillor Cook. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In relation to public forum, I think that needs to be returned. It should be done under strict time limits, particularly given our 10 o'clock close. So I propose 3 minutes with an extension of 1 minute and a maximum of 30 minutes allowed for the segment. Many of the councils in our area allow it. Blacktown gives 3 minutes, up to 30 minutes. Fairfield can ask questions on any matter. Liverpool allow a forum. It must be a matter which, in the opinion of the chair, is within the jurisdiction and influence of council. So I think there's a place and a role for public forum, and half an hour of our time is not too much to give to the community. And then public address on matters on the council agenda. This, of course, is already permitted, and we heard from former Councillor Pigram tonight. But the amendment specifies that the addresses should occur at the time that the agenda items are being considered, and I think that allows then the person to make their point at a time when all councillors are focused on the issue. It should be limited to 3 minutes with an extension of 2 minutes. I haven't inserted any maximum time limit there for the segment because I think if we're trying to resolve a matter, then we should listen to what other people have to say first if they make the effort to come to council to speak to us. So they're my amendments to the Code of Meeting Practice, and I ask you to support them.
I believe I've got Councillor Addy next. Is that correct? Councillor Addy, and then Councillor Christo, Councillor Campbell, and Councillor Hammett. Councillor. Oh, sorry. Well, I'll get there. Councillor Addy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it seems like Councillor Lake's been sitting with me for the last week in going through this motion, with the exception of a few more that I've added on top as well. Mr Mayor, I don't have an issue with what Councillor Lake has proposed, and quite frankly, half of it's actually exactly what I've got here. So that's why this list is not going to be as long as you think it is. Having said that, I do not agree, though, with the first item, which is changing the Code of Meeting Practice to go from 10 meetings to 20, and I'll explain why. If you do place 20 in there, from memory, and through you, Mr Mayor, the General Manager, you can clarify this, the Local Government Act states that a council must meet at least 10 times a year. So by capping it and placing that you've got to meet 20 times a year, then requires a change of the Code of Meeting Practice if in the event we don't have anything or something that's drastic required, that we can actually say, well, the next meeting on the third Wednesday, don't worry about it. So that's going to be an issue with respect of forcing us to have 20 meetings a year. Whether you have one for the first Wednesday and one on the third Wednesday is irrelevant of how many you have in a year, as long as you have 10. So if Councillor Lake is okay with this, we'd remove the part about that entire section about omitting from 10 to 20, just leave it as it is. If that's okay with you.
Councillor Lake.
I'll think about it. Keep going, Councillor Addy. I'll see what else you're trying to get through.
Well, everything else, well, if we can go one by one, it'd be great. But anyway, now with respect of the other items on this agenda, and please, I need to be corrected by the General Manager if I am incorrect. There is a definition in there on the definitions of administrator. Is that still required to be in the Code of Meeting Practice?
Mr Ryan.
I assume, Mr Mayor, that that's something that's come from the model code on the assumption that from time to time some councils in the state may be dismissed and an administrator appointed, and therefore a Code of Meeting Practice is in place.
But I can't find anywhere else in the document that actually refers to an administrator anywhere else. That's what I thought, yeah.
I think you'll find it's come from the model code. Council obviously can delete that if they wish to.
Well, I don't see why we need a definition of a word that's actually not in the Code of Conduct.
Have you done a search to see if the word pops up?
Sorry, I did. I couldn't find it. So what I'd like to do is remove the word administrator. Plus, it makes us feel better as well.
Councillor Lake, would you accept that one?
I'll just listen to the raft of them and then make a decision. Okay. Thank you.
And what I'd also like the councillors to entertain, if they would, is instead of having notice of meetings, which is 1.2, that states, where is it? For items 1 and 3, that go for, I think from memory, it was 3 days. I believe we should be giving more notice about meetings rather than, like the documents that we're receiving, we've only got 3 days to go through it. And if we want to have a meeting together, or if Labor wants a caucus or Liberals want a caucus, I actually had 6, and I'll tell you why I had 6. It makes it very difficult for us to sit down and go through the papers. Yeah, well, the papers are actually there 3 days beforehand as well. So it's the same thing. We know when the meetings are on.
But which paragraph are you seeking to amend? That's what I'm trying to work out.
1.2.
Yeah, 1.2 isn't about receipt of agenda papers. It's just notice of the meeting
to be transacted. So that is the documentation or the actual uploading of the business papers. 6.1, isn't it? No, it's 1.2 notice of meetings, item 1 and item 3. I'm leaving item 2 in there, just in case of extraordinary meeting, but item 1 and 3 should be at least 6 days. If 7, I haven't got a problem with 7, but at least should be at least 6 days. Weeks.
Ms Gagnon.
Mr Mayor, councillors, on page 92, 1.5(1)(a) talks about copies of the agendas will be available on Friday prior to the meeting and available for the public at that time, which is the 3 days. So if that's a matter, we could amend
want it on the
bit
Wednesday
as well.
rather than the Friday, or the Tuesday rather than the Friday. Which I understand it puts a bit more pressure on the staff to get the documentation ready. But once you have these things streamlined, then it should be quite easily put forward and going through.
There are a few other places that.
Yes, that's correct, yes. And that's why I've also got that in other places, but because you alerted me to the fact that it's fine. Because there's also a section that says about for motions and etc. That's got to be changed as well to be 5 p.m. on the Wednesday rather than the Thursday. So it brings it back a day so you can actually put motions in to give you time to get into the business papers as well. Yes, no?
Mr Mayor, councillors, it may be useful if the outcome you want is 5 days notice, 10 days notice, whatever it is, if that's the outcome, if that's part of your resolution, we can then amend the relevant sections within here based on that.
Okay, so the outcome is to give us at least 7 days notice. We know when the meetings are actually on. It's more the business papers that we really want beforehand. And then, of course, whatever else follows will have to also come before that as well, which also includes giving motions, so it's got to be before that time as well. In addition to that, there was an issue with respect, I take Councillor Lake's point regarding public forums. I think that we're not really used to public forums at former Auburn City Council, only because we actually had speakers come and speak prior to each item. Whereas when former Councillor Pigram came in, he spoke about 4 or 5 different items at once, which sort of confuses you which way we keep going and flick through the papers. I'd rather see a speaker come in and speak about an item right before the item. Now, I know it makes it difficult for them because I have to stay for the rest of the evening, but then it helps us that we're discussing an item that's actually just spoken about, so it stays fresh in the mind.
That's what my amendment achieves. Yes. The public forum is a different segment. It's about people coming in to talk about things that aren't on the agenda.
And I think that why have, for example, the public come in once a fortnight to speak about something when there is a mechanism in place.
Move Councillor Garrard, second Councillor Rami. All those in favour? No. Against, declare it carried.
What happened?
Got an extension.
Another minute.
Oh, thank you. What I believe is the public does have that mechanism now in place where they can actually speak to the staff every single day. I mean, having them come in once a fortnight to ask about something or have an issue clarified, they can do that every single day. Why have it come once a fortnight? So that's why I believe that a forum should be in place. That yes, they can come and speak about what's on the agenda of the actual meeting, but they should not be coming in once a fortnight to ask about something else when they can do it every day. So that's something that I need to also look at changing in the public forum if council was to agree with that point. Changing the minutes and times and etc. Your exact points 3 and 2 and reduce to 30 minutes exactly the same as what I've got. Invited speakers, I think 10 minutes is too long. I want to reduce that down to 5 minutes, which is item 2.9. And 2 minute extension maximum. The The time limit for meetings, I know we're capping the meetings at 10 o'clock, but I also would like to see, if council accepts, which is item 2.15, is to allow the mayor a leeway of about 30-minute extension on a meeting just in case it's something important where we just don't just stop at 10 o'clock on the dot. Allowing the mayor to give it a maximum of 30 minutes additional time for a meeting just in case we're debating something that requires to be resolved rather than... I couldn't find it anywhere in the actual documentation.
I thought it said that you could finish the matter that you were debating.
Finish the item.
Finish the item.
Yeah, but what if that item goes on for an hour?
You can.
2 hours? It's not a problem?
No, it's not a problem.
What if there's something else on that we don't get to that we really want to also bring
That
up?
you can't bring up.
Who's chairing this meeting? You or Councillor Luck?
Take your point, Councillor Garrow. I'm
Trying to be
letting
helpful,
Councillor
Garrow.
Yeah, I'm just trying. So, when quite frankly, a lot of this, because we're just going through, Councillor Addy shouldn't even be on the timer because we're just trying to.
No, I haven't actually spoken to us, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm only going through the items.
Yeah. Continue, please, Councillor Addy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Or should I call you Lord Mayor?
No.
Everyone else has been. So sorry, Mr. City Mayor. The issue with respect of phone calls, mobile phones, which I know we don't use our phones. I don't think anyone's going to use their phones in the chamber to make calls or receive calls, but
Eddie will.
Really does it, he can, whatever, it's not a problem. But it says here the council officials are not permitted to use their mobile phones during council and committee meetings. I'd like to change that to reflect for the purpose of making or accepting phone calls. Because we do get messages, it could be an emergency, it could be anything, we want to check on something ourselves, then we should be able to use the mobile phones. So I think it's actually quite absurd that we can't use a mobile phone in the chamber if we want to check a message or look at something for reference, for argument's sake. We're not taking calls or making calls, but I'd like to have that changed to actually reflect the fact that it should be to either make or accept phone calls. So no, we can't use it if we're going to make or accept calls.
General Manager, I understand this issue has been brought up, at least in the fallout from a previous council. I would assume that, the General Manager would have protocols for certainly staff use of mobile phones that wouldn't be affected by this policy, and that they would plan to stay.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I would not expect a member of staff to be using a mobile phone in council chambers to make a call. However, we may need to use them to access the internet, just as I did to work out what banks don't call themselves.
Exactly.
You wouldn't be expecting an autopsy on this council to produce texts from staff and all that sort of stuff.
Mr. Ryan.
I have been involved in inquiries of councils and all the text messages that were sent and shouldn't have been sent by staff members to staff members we claim subject to that inquiry, but I would not expect staff at this council to be sending texts or making phone calls on their phones.
That's what happened in Alden Public Inquiry, by the way.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, the last item, and there's a few others which I'll leave for another day because I think it's going to cause a big hoo-ha and uproar in this chamber. But item 6.1, we're rescinding or altering resolutions. Item 2A, I'd like to have that changed because I believe it's a bit ambitious to only allow half a day to put a rescission motion in. Having a rescission motion to go in by 12 midday of the next day, when you need to go and get 2 or 3 councillors to sign it, is a bit ambitious. So I'd like that to reflect that it should be on the Friday following the meeting, the first Friday following the meeting by 5 p.m. on item 6.1. 2A, and 2B, 1, I really would like that removed. Which is a council, which has happened in the past. I'm not saying that Mr. Ryan's going to do this or his staff are going to do this, but in the past, the resolution gets carried tonight, then the first thing in the morning, the letter goes out to the client or whatever the issue is, and we can't rescind the motion because the council has acted upon it. I think that is too much of a loophole, and I think that should be removed. So that's 6.12B1 or BI. I think it's BI.
If it's directly to do with that item, otherwise I have a series of speakers, so Councillor Elmore.
question regarding rescission of motions, you can rescind the motion anytime you want. The only time you can't rescind a motion, but I understand it was a development application when the applicant's already been notified the development has been approved, and 2 days later you get a rescission motion, so you can't rescind it. So I understand. Am I right saying anything? A motion of council could be rescinded at any time.
Can I clarify that, or
I'll let Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, the situation could arise where the decision is to accept a tender for works or some other service, and once that contract is commenced, it's not possible, I think, for council then to rescind that contract. So that rescission motion can be moved, but it will have no effect in that circumstances. Or to do with sale of land, for instance, or the purchase of land, as any other similar contract council result entered into. The rescission motion probably could not be carried out anyway if that's taken place. In normal circumstances, such as a policy matter, of course, the council can change its direction on those things at all times.
Councillor Sarkis.
Hey, so with the rescission motion, we in former councils, we had a cut-off time.
12 o'clock Friday.
It was, yeah, that was the last, I think, 3 years of that council term. The clarification that I'm seeking is from what Councillor Elmore has just said, that you could rescind at any time. So is he alluding that you could rescind after a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Yes, if no work has been undertaken with respect to the motion.
If it hasn't been acted.
So which would lead me to my next question, Mr. Mayor, that is, when a decision's been given on one matter, you can rescind that. But if you want to put up a different, you'd have to wait 3 months for it before. So correct. For me, it would say that you could rescind up to 3 months then, but after 3 months, it would be a new motion altogether, or a new matter to be put forward. So would it be correct in saying then that 3 months would be the rescinding time?
No, I don't think so, Mr. Ryan.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, the situation is for staff to understand that we are to wait a period of time before enacting the council resolution that commits council to a course of action, such as a contract of sale, a contract of purchase, a tender, or some other process like that, or in some circumstances it could be the submission of a planning proposal to the government. So if we as staff act upon your resolution immediately and you then wish to seek a rescission, it may be too late. What the Code of Meeting Practice attempts to give is a period of time before the staff of this council will enact a council resolution to enable councillor to move a resolution, propose a rescission motion. The law that Councillor Sarkis is talking about comes to the process that the 3 month limit arises about time frame after a decision before you can submit a rescission motion that actually can be carried out, such as a policy change or something like that. And the other part is if that's lost, and then it can't come back again for another period of time after that. So it's just a mechanism for the staff to understand we wait for a certain period of time until we enact a council resolution to allow you to propose a rescission motion. And the time frame, really now there's no development applications, can be extended to another time frame, but we need to be given guidance as when you want us to act your resolutions.
Well, so long as it's purely on this, because I've got to... Yep, okay.
Procedural.
Yep.
Perhaps we would be better off taking this one offline. I note that the government does have an almighty sense of humour when this issue around rescissions goes through a comprehensive review of the Local Government Act and comes out almost exactly the way it came in. But with respect to some of these other details, perhaps we're better off having a less formal environment about it, where we don't have a 10 o'clock deadline. We still have some 4 notices of motion to go through. Perhaps we could take it to a briefing, and in doing so, if I was to do so, I would ask a little bit of levity from you, Mr. Mayor, for the next 1, hopefully not 2 council meetings, around the potential opportunities for ministers of the cloth to present to council as a stopgap measure.
Mr. Ryan, would I have that discretion, or am I bound by the code of meeting practice as is?
Mr. Mayor, I hesitate to say I suggest you be bound by the code of meeting practice. I would also comment that on Councillor Groves' suggestion is that this would not be enacted, therefore, until the February meeting of Council, because we'd run past the 42-day period. Can I make a suggestion? And is that obviously there's a period of time where individual councillors can make submissions to the exhibition, and Council can consider that at the meeting when they wish to adopt the code of meeting practice. And some of the things that Councillor Addy is moving are not, sorry, no offence, are not of great moment in terms of the code of meeting practice, and maybe could just be done as a result of submission to the exhibition if they can't be dealt with tonight.
Okay. And the other thing is that all this might be rather academic when the LLG are going to come out with a mandatory code of meeting practice, which was brought up today in the hit the ground running session that both Councillor Campbell, Councillor Garrard, the General Manager and myself attended.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, from memory there was a gentleman here from the legal division of the Office of Local Government during one of our inductions, and he stated that there will be mandatory and non-mandatory sections of the Code of Meeting Practice. I
believe you're right, Councillor Addy. But
so there are things that we can change, there are things that we can't change.
But until we actually know the parameters,
we don't know what's going, which is supposed to be sometime next year.
Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, my items aren't exactly much.
I mean, it's a lovely to understand the table. We're going to get some teacups out and have some respondents to that. I mean, is there? We've got rules of debate. We just can't have people talking. I understand you've got a list there, and doing that list, there's some people over there want to talk.
Yeah.
And you've got our name on the list, right?
Yeah.
Now, we're not entering into debate. We're not upsetting anybody, but all of a sudden we've got a ton of questions over here. They're not questions, they're statements, and they're going nowhere.
Look, I agree, and quite frankly, I believe this whole item should have been workshopped through, and probably should have been spent a day to make sure we had it right. Quite frankly, my opinion is we're doing it on the run, and that we're always going to make blues.
Mayor, I'm happy to move, and I'm sure that, I'm not sure, but I would assume that Councillor Lake would be happy to move that way. I don't know, that we do take it to the workshop and work through this. I mean, there is a bit to get through, and we want to get it right, I would imagine.
I'm prepared to accept most of what Councillor Atty's putting up. So, yeah, I think he has. I think that was his last one.
It was.
Maybe if we can.
If there's anything else we can workshop, I mean, there are
get
things
a resolution. But I'm very comfortable with what Councillor Atty's suggesting. I don't agree with everything. I'm happy to tell you which.
Well, to be fair, and then I'm going to run through the list. Can we quickly run through what you agree, so we have some sort of common ground, and then the councillors can debate?
I'm happy to take the 20 back down to 10. It says at least 10. I take your point there. That's fine. I'm happy to remove the definition of administrator if the word's not used in the document. That's fine. I'm happy to see business papers available on the Wednesday rather than the Friday, provided the officers kindly go right through the document and make all the consequential amendments that all have to flow from that in relation to timing of notices of motion, etc. I won't agree to omitting public forum. I feel very strongly that a public forum should stay.
I actually didn't have it up there.
Oh, okay, fine.
I said it's for another day to look at.
Good. You wanted invited speakers to be limited to 5 minutes. Our experience with invited speakers is that they're generally professional people like lawyers giving legal advice, or somebody who's travelled, fair long distance. I wouldn't like to see them limited to 5 minutes.
It'd be an auditor or something like that.
Yeah, I think 10 minutes is appropriate.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
On that, we've had experiences where, you've had 40 speakers or 25 speakers on the night, right? If it's an invited speaker, I mean, even with 5 minutes, we can move to extend it to 10, we can extend it to 20. But I think we should start off with the base and then work our way up from there at the meeting as requested.
Mr. Mayor,
I've just been advised that if we delay it to the November meeting, we can, as a late report, we can still make the December deadline.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just with regards to the invited speakers, if I may, sorry, I may have misinterpreted the invited speakers. In Auburn, everyone was an invited speaker.
No.
Now, expert reports were not part of invited speakers. They go for half an hour, we don't care.
Yes.
Just on that.
So you agree to leave it at 10 minutes? That's what I
Now,
mean.
then that's fine.
I agree to extending from 10 p.m. to another 30 minutes because I think we need it. Yep.
So invited speakers and expert invited speakers, 2 minutes. But how about the speakers that are, if you like expert residents that are getting up to speak? No. We had a time limit, I think it was 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, different. They're not invited.
We're not talking about
No.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
That's right.
4 minutes. Public forum's 4 minutes. This is invited speakers. This is.
Well, we used to call them invited speakers.
Yeah, they'd be experts.
You can remove that if you want.
I don't have a problem with you being able to use mobile phones to text each other, or whatever. The rescission. What was the date? Can you tell me again what you were trying to amend that clause to say, rather than the following day?
Says by midday the next day.
Yes.
I'll be just taking it to the following Friday, which is 2.5 days more. 2.5 days after the actual.
Well, midday the next day, it's Thursday, isn't it?
Sorry, yeah, 2 days after.
So all you're doing is taking it one day?
Yes, 1.5
Yeah,
days,
that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. So, I'd be prepared to argue that these clauses are fairly mundane and we should just proceed tonight and get it done and get it out. It's only going out for public comment. It'll come back anyway. If you find in the interim that there's a problem with anything in the document, we have an opportunity then in December to fix it. If the resolution has already been put into effect, the rescission motion must be rejected by the General Manager unless it is a resolution capable of rescission. That's just common sense.
That's common sense. You can't just do it. Yeah, that's why it's removed.
I think it's good to be there for clarity so people can have a think about it at the time they're drafting a rescission motion. They have to turn their mind to whether it's capable of being rescinded.
If that clause is omitted, does that mean that staff are forced not to apply the motion until 5 p.m. Friday?
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding of that provision, which is 2B1, is circumstances that I explained to Councillor Elmore. If the decision of council has been carried out and it cannot be reversed because it's a contractual arrangement or something like that, this clause, I would say that rescission motion is rejected because it cannot be rescinded because action's taken place. Only those circumstances would I be able to reject a rescission motion.
Yeah, so I suppose what we're trying to get to is that if we have until 5 p.m. Friday, will you enact any motions that have been carried forward?
No.
If that clause stays there.
Mr. Ryan,
depends how brave he is.
Just saying.
Be in breach of the code.
Mr. Mayor, if the Code of Meeting Practice says the motions will not be put in place until 5 p.m. on Friday following the council meeting, then staff and I will not enact a council resolution till that time frame, unless, of course, you resolve on the night to tell us to do it straight away, because it might be a purchase of land or something you want.
Need to move.
Oh, that would be against the way the government has to be doing, because that's effectively trying to pull up the. Yeah, it's kind of like doing a decision after the fact.
No, it's not. There is a provision in the Act that doesn't do that.
I reckon, I'd be calling it.
So, Councillor Lake, you've accepted all those suggested amendments?
Except for the last one. Item 2B1, that should stay.
Okay. Councillor Hammond, you accepting those? Council, do you want me to run through the list of speakers? All right, Councillor Christo, you have the call, and then followed by Councillor Campbell, Councillor Hammond, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Christo.
I was just seeking clarification. My colleague, Councillor Lake, when she referred to the prayers, stated that it was an administrator that removed the prayers. And I apologise in advance if I've got this wrong, but I was under the impression it was Mr Ryan that removed the prayers.
No, it was an emotion moved and carried by the administrator in August just gone.
Thanks for clarifying.
Councillor Campbell.
I was going to move an amendment about the 7 days notice, but Councillor Addy took the words out of my mouth. Thank you. Oh, gee. But I do want to move an amendment to delete 1B from Councillor Lake's motion. That is to admit acknowledgement of country and insert opening prayer, acknowledgement of country and national anthem. I'd like to leave it as it is. And the reason I'm doing that is that we are a pluralist, secular society in Australia.
Before you continue, Councillor Campbell asked for a second for that. Is there a second for that?
I'll second it for the purposes of debate.
Second, Councillor Gray. Thank you. Councillor Campbell, you have 5 minutes.
Councillor Lake said that 20% of the population of Cumberland don't have any religion.
It was 18%.
Was it?
Or 14, sorry, it was 14.
Whatever. Anyway, my point was going to be that the exact number is not central to what I'm going to say. In Australia, the census found that 60% of the population did identify with some religion or other. And yeah, and it's a bit different here. Now, for many people, prayer is a very important part of their life, and I respect that. And there's a time and a place for people to pray. But for many other people, it's not. We're a tolerant society. We all respect each other. We respect each other's religion, their beliefs, opinions about religion, and so on. It's the role of civil authority, I think, to defend freedom of religious belief, but not to impose religious belief on anybody. And religious ideas suffer if they're shoved down people's throats. And it's not the role of council to do that, to assert the truth of any religious dogma or to deny the truth of any religious dogma. Religiously, the council should be neutral in a secular society. That is protection for everyone's belief. If no belief is allowed to dominate, push out others, then everyone's religious belief becomes safe. And that is where the principles of secularism arose, out of religious persecution. So we represent everybody in the community, not only the religious people. If it's 20%, 30%, 14%, whatever it is who are not religious, we still represent them, and we should not confront them with other people's religious beliefs. Councillor Lake, in proposing a prayer, did not present us with any words. So I don't know how we could accept a prayer without seeing it. In other words, we're being asked to give a blank cheque. Who will write the prayer? Will it come back to council for scrutiny? Will it be full of stuff that is offensive to some people but supported by other people? We don't know. It's a blank cheque, and I don't think we should give a blank cheque, even if we did agree to a prayer. Yeah. So what I'm saying is we must all respect each other's personal views, but as an elected secular body, we must be religiously neutral and inclusive of everybody, whether they're religious or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was in two minds about this issue for a couple of reasons, and the first reason is that we took an oath only not long ago, and to me that you didn't take an oath. Well, an oath or an affirmation.
Council.
That was the first reason, and the other reason was I was quite conscious of not imposing my views on others, and I think, George, you are right in that regard, that we need to be tolerant of other people's perspectives. However, I think that we need to represent the people of Cumberland, and of 226,051 people, as Councillor Lake said, 77% of those people nominated a religion. And so representing the majority, I think, is quite an important thing for this council to do. And so therefore, obviously, I'm speaking for the motion. As for the national anthem, I think it's, I like a song. It's something that I think is really, really important. It's a part of our identity, and I think we should move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamid. Councillor Garrard.
Exhibition in any fashion or form will be a win, I think. Firstly, I think councillors in the chamber should be standing when they address the chair. This is a practice which is accepted in our legal system, and I might add, and in the Local Government Act, if you wish to create order in the chamber, you stand. And I think it's a better presentation for the gallery to be able to be part of, appreciate everything that's being stated, and to be more fully involved if people are committed to addressing the chair when they speak. The other issue is in relation to petitions. Now, I'm going through the meeting practice here. It's the practice that you don't talk to petitions. There's no discussion, there's no motion to a petition. Now, I think that's crazy. At a time when you're trying to involve community in local government, and when you have a council meeting which is the opportunity for the community to have their say and to see how their community representatives are performing, you're going to say that they take the time to get a petition together over some issue which is, massively important to them. Yet when you come here and give it to the chamber, you can't say a word. You can't move a resolution. That's crazy. That's full of old Holroyd stuff, and we need to get rid of that.
There's 5 votes right there for you.
Well, I don't care. If you lose, I don't care that, because you lose 500 out there. Part 2 of that petition thing should go. The chairman will only permit discussion on the petition or correspondence if the subject matter is already on the agenda. Well, that's rubbish. That should be out. Leave part 3 as it is. In relation to rescission motions, look, I think rescission motions have to be used as a tool. At the end of the day, when anyone comes to a chamber meeting, to a council meeting, they should walk away knowing very well what decision was made here, not what decision is going to be made by 12 o'clock tomorrow. If the matter, if it's the intention of this chamber to cease any action on a matter, the resolution, the rescission motion ought to be lodged before the meeting's finished, so that if there's a contractual issue, if there's a land arrangement or anything else of vital importance, that the person who takes the time to come to the council meeting knows what decision that was made. And if a person doesn't, and if someone here doesn't like that decision and feels that they're going to change it and could reconvince the chamber, well, they should know that too. And that's why I believe that the chamber needs to use the rescission motion as a tool and say, put it in by the night that you close the meeting, everyone's on the same page, and then no action is taken on that matter until that rescission motion comes back to the chamber. And I'll bet you when the new local government regulations come forward in this matter, that's what's going to be determined. You can't have a resolution being passed here tonight and someone having a bad morning tomorrow and deciding to put something in by 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon or the day after. Where's the certainty in decision making if you're going to do that? Not only that, there could well be the political aspects of what goes on in a chamber, and it's about moving business forward. So if someone moves a resolution tonight and then there's 2 or 3 got their nose out of joint and they're going to hold the matter up for another 2 weeks, well, the chamber should have the ability to hear the rescission motion that night so that it gets on, you get it out of the way. So again, it becomes a tool. But hearing the discussion around the chamber tonight, I don't think too many people understand what rescission motions are really about. Generally, I support most of the other matters that are raised tonight by the speakers, and quite frankly, the sooner we get this thing out of the way, the better.
So I've got a clear understanding, Councillor Garrard. Are you asking the mover and the seconder of the original motion to accept your suggested amendments?
I'll make it very simple, Mr. Mayor. Number one, I think the issue on petitions should be easier to cop, that you're able to move a motion.
While you're up, Councillor Lake, would you?
I support it in principle. Just want to know which paragraph you're referring to in the
which
code.
is under petition 2.18. Page 99.
99.
So you don't have to have the petition on the agenda to be able to speak to it. That's what you're saying.
Have to be on the agenda.
Yes, I agree with that.
Councillor Hammond, do you agree? Yes, thank you.
And the other, I'll forget about the rescission motion because there's so many opinions around the room. I'm certain you're not going to listen to me, but you will have to listen to the Department of Local Government, and they will say what I've just said. So I'll get my way that way. And the other matter is, I really think people we should get into the custom in this chamber of standing up and addressing the chair. I think that is just good manners, and a respect for the position, and a respect that we have in public life anyway.
I'll put it to the mover. Do you?
We were actually explained and brought in here, sat down and explained that the preference was for us to stay seated. Now, I'm not sure if that's because we're being filmed or because there's some philosophical decision about how we're not adversarial, but we're all together discussing around a table, bringing something to a resolution.
It's got nothing to do with any of that, but I don't know what happened here in Holroyd where the people did.
No. This is the general. Perhaps Mr. Ryan can explain better than me, Mr. Mayor, why we don't, why we're not standing. Yes, this is some direction that was given to us a fortnight ago.
Can I clarify that, Mr. Mayor, for Councillor Garrard? In the last council, with committees, with development, with all the papers, we didn't need to stand. It was only the white paper, which was council business, where we had to stand. I can't comprehend yet why we don't stand in this council, or why there's no, guidelines for us to be standing when addressing in council the mayor, or anybody through you as the mayor. Sorry? Well, mine is on. You're right. Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, then that would need to be addressed, but I'd like to know why, through you, why indeed we were asked not to be standing but to remain seated when addressing you. I'd like to know that.
Mr. Ryan, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When the Code of Menu Practice was presented to the Administrator, we presented the model code supplied by Office of Local Government. The philosophy, as I understand it, is to present a less aggressive chamber, and that people aren't standing to be seen to be dominating other people, other members of the council or members of the public. I assume that's the reason. It's certainly been my experience in my 2 previous councils. The councillors didn't stand to do that purpose. The Mayor had the right, obviously, to stand to call order at all times, but that's set in the regulation of the Act. But that's the philosophy, is that The idea was not to create an aggressive environment, therefore not to stand. But that's a matter for council to decide. Warringah and Hawkesbury didn't stand. I think Byron didn't stand.
So, Councillor Garrow, would you? Sorry, Mr. Ryan.
I remember now that Lismore didn't stand either because Lismore had a councillor who was in a wheelchair. So they decided that standing was inappropriate and discriminatory against that particular council as well.
Would you like to ask the mover for that to be included, or would you like to make a submission, Councillor Garrett?
No, I won't insist on people standing, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a matter of personal choice, whether you choose to stand. Some people are more comfortable sitting down, some people are more comfortable standing. I'm not in court now. And in fact, in a lot of tribunals now, people stay seated.
Would you like to flag that as a possible amendment if the amendment?
I'll second it, Mr.
Mayor. I've already got one amendment on the table. I've got Councillor Sarkis and Councillor Rami.
I'd like to ask a question through you to the appropriate officer, and that is, with exhibition times, are there any periods in the 12 months that we have that are omitted from exhibition times?
Mr. Ryan.
So, for example, over the Christmas, New Year's break, when residents may well be away, you sometimes have a exhibition of a particular zoning rechange or something of that nature, where the residents in that area may well be away and can't comment on that. So, in former councils, there's been a period over the Easter break, over the Christmas, New Year's break, or whatever the case may be, where we've said, during this period, although it's advertised, it's not included as part and parcel of the advertisement period, because, you know, a certain percentage of residents will be away on school holidays, whatever the case may be. So I'm asking, with our policy now, because I can't find it anywhere there, is there a period of time over the school holidays, the Christmas or New Year's, or the end of year, New Year's, depending on who you are, break, where there is a exhibition period that's omitted from the actual exhibition period?
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, that's not covered in the Code of Meeting Practice. There is no current policy about exhibition periods. It is practice that we won't exhibit over the Christmas period. Ms Kenyon is proposing to bring forward a draft policy on engagement to Council for consideration via workshop, which will include those sorts of mechanisms to understand the situation. But currently, there is no policy, but it is our practice not to exhibit over a Christmas holiday period.
Well, then I'd ask them, the mover and seconder, if they would accept for the interim dates of maybe the 20th of December till the 10th of January, that 20-day period not be included in the exhibition period for now until further workshop, or a workshop that we may go to next week, for example, where we can discuss this, because I think it's crucial for residents to be able to give input on matters that are up for exhibition.
Yeah, I don't believe it's part of the Code of Meeting Practice, so I'm more than happy to take it as a future motion.
It's a good policy, Mr.
That was my
Mayor.
matter arising, but I thought I'd throw it in now through the questions being asked.
I don't think it should be included in the Code of Meeting Practice, but
There is policy around how we go about consultation, and perhaps it can be amended into that policy. Yeah.
right. Well, I think we should move on. So I've got Councillor Rami.
That's all right. I guess my point for this. who don't believe in a God or whatever people may believe in. But yeah, I still believe a prayer, even if it's of a general nature, needs to be there.
Councillor Grove.
Look, I'm not quite sure what's before us tonight, and quite frankly, I don't care anymore. At the end of the night, we've had some substantial things discussed. Councillor Zraker still has 4 actual items that are relevant to ratepayers, everyday lives. I think the fact that we've got a 10 o'clock closure is a problem, particularly when we're looking in the light of bringing in more ceremonial stuff at the start, particularly around the prayer stuff. I think if we're going to start doing that, we need to look at seriously extending that 10 o'clock closure to something much closer to midnight. It does frustrate me that we've spent, best part of 2 hours, probably more, discussing facilities and, the order of this chamber, particularly since, we could probably have a more sensible debate offline about this current one. So I'll be voting no, and, with respect to whatever's before us, I'll be voting no to all amendments in that space, and I'll be moving that the motion be put.
Move that the motion be put. Councillor Rami seconded. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Council, I have an amendment. Moved Councillor Campbell, seconded Councillor Grove, with all that was previously agreed, but the deletion of the national anthem and the prayer. I'll put that amendment. I think it's right. Councillors, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And the national anthem.
I asked that whole thing to be deleted.
What whole thing? Oh, the whole section.
And the prayer.
Let's leave it as it was.
So Councillor Campbell and Grove is against.
I'm putting the
The amendment that was moved is actually the motion.
No.
no.
My motion was to reinsert prayer and national anthem.
Yes.
And all the others agreed to.
Oh, sorry, and Grove seconded for debate.
Correct.
For purposes.
Correct.
Because we need to go.
Well done.
Okay, so are we clear?
Yes.
I will put the amendment. Well, I'm waiting to see whether the amendment's going to be defeated. Okay. And then I have the foreshadowed amendment. And then, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. General Manager. So I'll put it. All those in favour?
Clarify, the amendment is to remove the prayer.
Remove the prayer and the national anthem. All those in favour of the amendment? Those against? I declare that lost. I now have Councillor Campbell, Councillor Garrard and Councillor Rami, I believe, seconded it. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Garrard? The standing, I believe, is the main issue.
Just put the motion.
No, it's fine, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Now, for the clarity of the amendment, do we know what the amendment is?
So it's everything that's been discussed in addition to that. So you have the prayer and you have the standing.
Yep.
And the
Putting the Garrard Rami amendment, the councillors should stand.
That's right. Yeah.
Everything else.
In addition to everything else.
Yep.
In addition to all yours.
Yep. All right. So I'm putting the amendment. All those in favour? Against?
The ayes have it. There's 2 abstains.
There's abstains against.
Yeah. Are they?
Yes.
Yes.
Lost.
So I'm now got the motion.
We'll call for a division.
Call for a division. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Councillor Sarkis, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Zeta, Councillor Rami, Councillor Zareka, Councillor Addy. Those against, please raise your hands. I've got Councillor Elmore, Councillor Kung, Councillor Lake, Saha, Ahmed, Christo, and Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. Declare it lost. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I've got Councillor Sarkis, I've got Councillor Zeta, Councillor Rami, Councillor...
For clarification, that's the whole motion.
That's the whole box and dice. Councillor Zareka, Councillor Addy, Councillor Kuang, Councillor Lake, sorry.
Just so everyone accepts.
Councillor Saha, Councillor Hamid, Councillor Christo, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Cummings. I declare it carried.
Next. Tom, you got 3 minutes.
Council,
No, sorry.
item 180-17, notice of motion, closed circuit television cameras and monitoring in Guildford. Councillor Zareka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I almost feel like Guildford. I'm always left without resources, you know. Sorry? Anyways, my motion's quite direct, but before I can start, can I just, through you, Mr. Mayor, ask the General Manager a few questions?
Certainly, but
Yep.
be
very quick.
short because I'm aware of the time.
Regarding the cameras, I'm told that there is a stockpile of machines actually sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Is that correct?
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. McNulty.
Councillor Drake, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. So
Councillor Drake, Council does own mobile CCTV cameras that are deployed, and we have a resolution to acquire another 30, so that would be 60 once that additional cameras are acquired.
Yep. And the
And
second question is whether we've received money from the state government regarding this.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, the second 30 is being acquired with money from the original $15 million grant arising from proclamation.
I've moved the motion, and if I can also amend that, there's an amendment to the word state of the art, if we can take that out. And paragraph 3, if we can take it out, there's no need for advertising.
Remove all of it, that's it.
Yeah, the whole thing. Yeah. So essentially, it's just a motion for a report as to costings for cameras in the worst hotspots in that area. I noticed that most of the other suburbs around this LGA have cameras. I was on the council at Auburn Council when we moved for those cameras, and my understanding is it reduced crime. The local residents, especially the shop owners, are complaining quite diligently, if I can say that, because it's an incessant thing now. They're complaining that they're not being served by local law enforcement, whether they were at that time the rangers at the previous council or by New South Wales Police. Every time they've complained to police, they're told, have you got evidence? And they don't, because frankly they can't afford that sort of security. So I'd be pushing I'd be moving for those cameras to be put in those areas. Now, if it's strategically or from a security point of view, not proper to put them in on those corners, I'm happy to be heard on it.
That should come back in there.
And that will come back in the report. So that's all I want to say for that first report.
Councillor Grave, are you seconding?
Yes, I'll accept that. Yes, I will.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion?
I'll be very quick. I asked to speak on
Councillor
this.
Elmore.
I've walked that street for 50 years. I've walked that area for 50 years, and I walk home, and the local shopkeepers talk to me, and they usually stop me about council not doing something like pick up the rubbish, or the streets are clean, or there's there's problems with the footpath, but I'm not hearing this from the local residents. And my barber that just retired, he retired a little while ago. When he got you in the chair, you're stuck there for 10 minutes, and you've got every problem in Guildford. But I'm certainly not hearing this from the residents, but residents and the business owners. But I certainly support part 2, which is the renewal of alcohol-free zones. I parked on one of the signs the other day, and they expired the 15th of 6, 2018.
Yep.
They commenced 2014. I remember when I was at Parramatta Council, we put that resolution through. I think that should be renewed. And another thing that's been concerning me recently is about these water pipes, these pipes that people smoke on the streets. I understand the legislation was changed a few years ago, whereby people couldn't smoke in outdoor dining areas. I understand it's been gotten around of because these businesses don't serve food in those outdoor dining areas. I think that's against their DA conditions. But could I add this to a report as well about if Councillor Yoder would accept we have a report on the smoking of these water pipes?
No, sorry. That's half my electorate.
Yeah, it is actually. I was at a conference of the licensed venues, and we had 2 representatives from the health department who had to carry out that legislation. And when I asked how many officers are going to enforce this part of the Act, of course I wasn't going to risk the officers of the then Holroyd Council. They said there's 4 officers for the state. So that's how serious the state government took the Act. But I don't think it's part of that. And the mover has rejected that, Councillor Elmore, so I'll move on. Who else had their hand up? Sorry. Councillor Christo and then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Christo.
I would like to just suggest that instead of just looking in the Guildford trouble spots, that maybe council look at all trouble spots identified across all wards that cover council.
Is that for both?
The cameras.
Cameras,
yep.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry to interject because I'm conscious of the time. For a question for the General Manager.
I apologise, it is for both, sorry.
Yes, for both? Okay. Yeah. I've heard as well that most of the alcohol-free zones have lapsed and they need renewal. So if that's the case, then I'd be moving to amend my motion to include all of them.
Yep.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I would probably be at liberty to report back the full extent of the problem rather than confine myself just to the report on the streets you propose. And that could also be for the cameras. I can take the opportunity to provide council with more advice about all sorts of trouble spots where CCTV might be used. So it's enough. I don't think you need to amend it. It's enough that I understand the problem and I'll report the matter back to council.
Thank you.
Satisfies you? Yeah, Councillor Christo. Councillor Campbell, then Councillor Grave, then Councillor Saha. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know what the General Manager just said, but I was going to ask Councillor Zraker if what's about another location in there.
You were doing the whole thing anyway.
Yeah, I know that I want to specify it for this.
Well, I'm sure you could.
All right, South Parade, Auburn.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, how much do we have and how much time do we have before 10 o'clock is?
Okay. 7 minutes.
I'll move that the motion be put.
Well, wait a minute. Okay. I've got a, sorry, Councillor Grave and Councillor Saha, but I've had a move from Councillor Rami that the motion be put, and it was seconded by one of the speakers, Councillor Grove. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? No. I declare that carried. All those in favour of the motion?
Aye.
Against? No. I declare that carried.
Next item on the agenda.
Council 181, notice of motion, traffic congestion at schools. Yes. Councillor Zarica.
It's on the same lines that we're seeking a report on costings. I mean, I don't want to rush it as well, but it's quite important, and options. Yep. Excuse me. And also in relation to Mona Street and Wellington Road, It's a bit of a problem, and I'm quite surprised previous councillors or previous councils haven't acted on this.
Really now?
Councillor Grove, are you seconding this? Oh, Councillor Sarkis, yes. Elmore, okay. Oh, so you've seconded. I'll go to Councillor Campbell first, and then Councillor Campbell.
To add some words to point 2 at the end of it. The study should look at the feasibility and cost of building a bridge across the Duck River, either from Manchester Road to Granville, or from Princes Road West to Boundary Road, Princes Road West, that's in Auburn, to Boundary Road, Chester Hill.
I agree.
I wonder who brought that up about 4 years ago.
I agree.
And also look at the likely effects of these options on traffic flows on Mona Street and Wellington Road, as well as any adverse traffic consequences.
You accept that?
I accept that.
Councillor Sarkis, did you accept that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Elmore.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Mayor. It seems as though the Auburn Review is currently stories in today's paper about school zones. And just on traffic, I've got a little story to tell. My grandfather and my mother, they grew up in Sheffield Street in Auburn, which is down on the south side. And my father told me that my grandfather said that there needs to be a dual lane carriageway across the bridge up the top of Auburn. I forget what the names of the streets are, but he died in 1953, and I think the bridge finally got built in about in the 2000s after the Auburn Central was built. I think Auburn Central paid for that. So traffic has always been an issue around Auburn. There's only two, as we know, there's only two streets, only Mona Street, Wellington Road. People use Wellington Road and Mona Street for a rat run to get between Auburn and Guildford, and that's further been exacerbated by the toll coming back on the M4. I've noticed a big change in the traffic. So I certainly support this, but if this learns the motion, but it's going to be a very big challenge to solve this issue.
Thank you, Councillor Elmore. Councillor Garrard.
and media, marketing.
Mr. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I may need advice from Mr. McNulty about the cost and size, but I assume that we haven't given any advice about money needed, that we would undertake preliminary advice and get back to council with an estimate of the costs of the report.
And
it's removed, and we put the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I had a comment. Only very quickly.
He wants to, hold on. He wants to get his motion before 10 o'clock.
It has.
I just want to add one street, if that's okay.
Well, we're going to finish this, but unfortunately, councillor, you've lost your opportunity for the last item.
Just Carlton Street in Granville. Carlton Street in Granville.
That's a study.
Add to number 2.
That's a real street in Granville. It is. No.
Between Railway Parade and William Street.
It's a major problem.
All right.
This is a council chamber.
Okay. So we've had a motion that the motion be put. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Council, it is now 10:01 by my computer.
The clock says 10 seconds to go.
Mine says 9:59.
That's right, it says 10 seconds to start.
Can I propose the next item with the clause 4 deleted?
I'll move the motion before. You can't speak, can you?
You can't. Council, well, all right, we'll run with it. Councillor Zarika.
Extend the council meeting for another 5 minutes.
Well, no, as long as you're dealing with a matter.
Yeah, all right. Who, Councillor Grove, are you seconding item 182? Okay, now I understand, Councillor Zareka, you've deleted part 4 of that clause 4. Would you wish to speak? No. Well, I've got Councillor Campbell first, then you, Councillor Sarkis. Councillor Campbell.
My amendment is Mr. Mayor, and that is, at the moment, is it correct in assuming it's 2 collections per year?
2, yeah.
It is 2. No, I believe it's 2. Can I, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the appropriate officer?
Through you, to you, Mr. Ryan.
Mr. McNulty.
The number of collections is actually different across the 3 former local government areas. Auburn had 4, I believe Holroyd had 2, and I think Parramatta had 3.
Is there an adoption that's uniform across all 3?
The waste contract envisages the move to 4 collections across the LGA.
Okay. So with the report, would the mover and seconder accept that a contrast or 2 scenarios be put forward? One's 4, because I believe that 4 would be more than enough. That's 1 collection per quarter. I think 8 is, way off the mark, and I think it would cost this council a lot of our budget to actually organise and structure that. I would be happy with 1 collection every 3 months. I think that ensures clean streets, habitable streets, and somewhere for our children and our elderly to walk on, as well as us, of course, and be proud of what we represent. So I'd like to see at least 4 times a year. I think 8 is excessive. In all honesty, I'm happy with the rest of the motion. It's only that 8. I think 2 is too little, which is what Holroyd had previously. I am aware that Auburn had 4, and I think that is a good number, 1 per quarter. I'd like to see that across the LGA. And so if you would accept that, that'd be great.
Councillor Zareka,
I'd speak to that if I can.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor.
yes.
I'd suggest that we do 4 scheduled and 4 not scheduled.
No.
Yeah, 4 scheduled and maybe 1 non-scheduled, and when required. I think this is heaps.
With the, Mr. Ryan,
Mr Mayor, the motion before council calls for report on costings regarding to increase is 8 times a year. In that report, we will show costings for 4 times a year and for 8 times a year, and most of the combinations and there in between as part of that report.
Councillor Zeta.
Sorry, I just heard the motion be put.
I've had my body in it for a while.
We also heard to put that in there.
So Councillor Campbell. Mr Mayor, councillors, Councillor Campbell, as I understand it, that amendment at the end, that the report consider options for schedule and book collections, that's in there, that's been adopted. And then above that, you've got schedule to 4 times a year. So if you're asking for the option, you're giving...
You have to go back to the 8.
It's either... But you're asking for options.
Yes.
So wouldn't the options be that you can have 4, 8, 10, 12?
Correct.
Is it we're giving the information? Yeah.
Yep.
I think the options,
Yep.
how you guys come back, I assume you guys can work with something.
All right.
Yeah.
We can. More than
Sorry, Mr Mayor, so the additional, well, I can't see it anywhere up there, I've been taken out.
Because what the General Manager, I'll ask Mr. Ryan, could you repeat what you said just previously?
Mr Mayor, in normal course of actions, council's called for a report on current collection system being increased 8 times per year. We will give a report on all the options available in between the current 4 proposed collections when the contract starts and 8 collections as part of that report. So you...
Well, if the officers can make that amendment for Councillor Campbell, please. Councillor Garrard.
Mr Mayor, look, I'll support the motion based on the fact that it's simply asking for a report. But what councils have to be aware of, that when you got 1 out of every 3 dwellings in the city is a unit, and then you have rows and rows of units putting out rubbish 4 times a year, the place looks like a rubbish tip. And on top of that, you've got ones, because the contractor has never stuck to the timescale for the zones to be picked up, one zone runs into the other. So then you have 2 zones next to each other with rubbish from one end of town to the other, and it really looks attractive. And that's why moving away from having fixed zones, fixed pickups was not the way to go. And that's why the idea was to pick up the phone for residents. If you want to have it picked up, ring up and organise it. Have a look, drive through Harris Park at the moment. I think it's their pickup time, and just see what Parramatta looks like when they've got this scheme that we're trying to do away with. So I don't know why we're going back and even considering it. And I might add, the government's view is about waste minimisation. This is hardly helping waste minimisation when you're encouraging people to throw your rubbish out.
Mr Mayor, I think let me just get in because everyone else is getting in.
Councillor Zeta.
Yeah.
Just in terms of point 1, through Mr Mayor, to the relevant officer, we've got a brand new contract that's already been signed off in respect of rubbish collection.
No.
Is that, yes we do. Soon that contract will apply to all parts of Cumberland Council. How flexible is that contract to allow us to make amendments to it that are being considered in this point, in this first part of the motion?
Mr. Ryan.
Mr Mayor, just to clarify, the contract is signed for the extension of 1 service across the whole council area, which has 4 booked services a year, I think. If we want to change that, council will pay for the extra services. And that will be part of the report back to council.
So will that change be deemed I suppose, us breaking the contract, or will it just be an extension of the current contract?
It would be a variation to the contract, Councillor Zeta.
Point two. In terms of projected cost, okay, in terms of household volume, just want to confirm, does the mover of this particular motion, is he asking for, I suppose these 4 pickups are probably equivalent to a trailer load? So is the mover asking to allow more than 1 trailer load of garbage to be picked? What's the purpose of point 2?
That's right. So increase the trailer load.
To what? 2, 3, 4, 5? Because the reason I'm asking that question is that we are attempting to quantify exactly how much it would cost to increase it from 4 to 8, but no one's actually setting an amount in point 2 to allow council staff to quantify what's the additional amount. Is it going to be 2 trailer loads?
We have an officer who would like to answer that.
The current arrangements allow for 4 collections of 1 cubic metre at a time.
So in order for staff to be able to quantify what the additional cost is, I think the mover needs to actually advise us in point 2, does he want to increase that to 2 cubic metres or 3 or 4? Otherwise, they can't quantify the cost.
It's plain English. So increase the volume.
To how much? How can they?
It doesn't matter. I mean, the report will address that.
No.
So you're requesting the mover?
Pick an amount.
Pick an amount, Tom. 2. Yes, pick a number between 1 and 2. So double. Pick a number between 1 and 3.
Okay. Now, then point 3, that was point 2.
Volumetric cubic meters.
That's when they turn up. In terms of point 3, do we not currently have a policy that if a garbage bin is damaged, that they just contact council and council will give them a new bin?
Mr. McNally.
That's provision in the contract.
So if that's the case, what do we need 3 for? If our residents can simply contact council and say we need a new bin if our bin's broken, what do we need to report?
Because all information's good information.
I'm just asking, like, if we currently have that service already.
Were you asking,
It's okay, it's the
Councillor?
last motion.
Who would you like?
I'm just, I suppose, asking the mover that our current policy is that the households can contact council anytime they want to replace their damaged bin. Why do we need a report regarding a program to replace on demand? We've already got it on demand, correct?
It's in the contract.
Yeah,
It's on demand now.
Correct.
We just found out.
Mr. McNally.
If a resident contacts council and says their bin's broken, the contractor provides them with a new bin.
Any size you like.
I think that the resolution was that the residents of the former Holroyd keep their 240 litre bins until they need to be replaced because they're damaged. Then they'll be replaced with a 140 litre bin, is the current resolution.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's my understanding.
Good to have a report, Mr. Zeta, because it's not replacing like for like.
I know where Councillor Zaid is coming from, because that's only if they take up the option of a
Correct.
green bin.
Correct. So it's my understanding that if their bin is broken, they will get replaced with a smaller bin. If they want the bigger bin, they have to pay an extra $200 a year or something in council rates.
If they also want the green bin.
If they want the green bin, correct. So,
is there any more discussion?
Put the motion, Mr.
No more discussion, right of reply, Councillor? No, I'll put it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Declare that carried. Council, I'll close the meeting at 10:13.
And 25 seconds.
I don't have a second on my clock.
Come on, we cover the times.
I'm an old-fashioned sort of guy.